Hello everybody, it's Tommy, and in today's video, I am putting together a massive compilation of all of the background changes that have been going on in my new version of Willow Creek for the Disney Save. As most of you know at this point, I have been working on renovating my previously completed Willow Creek for the Disney Save, and there have been a lot of little changes that I have done in the background that didn't make enough content to create their own video out of. Some of these are going to be really large renovations that create a completely new build or character, and some of them are much smaller. So I've combined everything today in this super long video. Let me know your thoughts on this style of video, and I can possibly continue to do this in the future. There will be speed builds, character creation, restaurants, menus, all sorts of things today. Plenty to look forward to, so let's get started. Hello! There is a lot to go over today. It might feel like at certain points that we are kind of like jumping around. I'm hoping that it doesn't, and this feels like cohesive enough. But there is also a lot to explain, so as we sort of like transition through the different things I'm going to be showcasing in the video today, I will try to get around to explaining what everything is if it's not explicitly clear. So I'm starting out with the first mini renovation that I did in Willow Creek. This is in my bayou themed neighborhood, and this is Blue Skies and Sunshine, which is Mama Odie's treehouse. This already existed in Willow Creek previously, but to be so honest with you guys, I always have hated this build. This is one of those builds that if I didn't have patrons, it wouldn't exist in the save file. And I mean this in like the kindest way possible, because patrons have brought me some of my greatest ideas, my most successful, most beautiful builds, characters, whatever it may be, to the Disney save. But this is something that my patrons really wanted that I really did not want to do. And it's really just a logistics issue. You are building this boat that is supposed to be like kind of at a weird angle and a little bit broken down, but it's also in a tree, in a massive tree, and it needed to be like in the bayou by itself and unexposed to the neighborhood and like the modern looking plants and street lamps. It needed to feel secluded. So originally Blue Skies and Sunshine was in the Dumbo neighborhood, and that was just because it was really the only place that it fit, and it went in there as mostly a filler idea, but also, like I said, patrons really wanted to have Mama Odie's treehouse be a residential, and I get why. Like, it is a cool build, but I just hated how I did it. Like, at the end of the day, I wasn't personally happy with it, so I was excited to jump back into this and just alter it a little bit. There were some things about it that I felt like I could do better that would make me be able to walk away from it and be much happier with the result, and I'm happy to say that's where I ended up. So first and foremost, I moved this to a slightly larger lot. And also, the surrounding builds in this neighborhood are all bayou themed now, so it makes more sense for it to be here. All the trees look nice, everything is just more cohesive. And even though it doesn't have that seclusion that it should have had, because if it was like a movie recreation, that's what I would have done, it looks so much better in this neighborhood. And it might just be because of the lot sizing in general, like I was able to add in more greenery and plants, but also like condense it, if that makes sense. And actually, if you remember back for Oasis Springs, I recently built Rafiki's treehouse. And so I had treehouse kind of fresh on the mind going into this build and realized that I really liked the way I did Rafiki's treehouse much better than how I did Mama Odie's. One of the things that really bothered me about Mama Odie's was the actual like tree topper that I used. It was one from Jungle Adventure, I believe. So although it had like the proper elements to it that made it look like it could fit well in the bayou, it wasn't the right type of plant, and it also clashed color-wise with the plants that are in Willow Creek. So it looked like a tropical-y sort of treehouse. Like, to me, this is giving like Tarzan treehouse, and it's not in Selva Dorada, so it doesn't look very good. So I definitely wanted to go into the build by replacing the top tree with an actual like willow tree that's one of the debug ones from this world, and that helped a lot. Another thing that I did not like that I originally did was the base of the treehouse, and this was really annoying and complicated because obviously this has to function, but also I was thinking when I originally built Mama Odie's treehouse that I really wanted a set of stairs to wrap around the tree trunk. But in an ideal world, this would have looked like a spiral staircase that was actually built into the trunk itself, and it would have been more like fairy-esque or more Fairy Village Tinkerbell vibes with like the tree almost being the stairs. And I wanted this because Mama Odie is an elder, and I just could not picture her going up and down a ladder to get into this treehouse. So I built this staircase, but you can only get staircases so close to other objects before they become unusable. And so the trunk wasn't right, the tree on top wasn't right, and then you just had this set of stairs that kind of like went off to the side, and it was very much floating, and it looked kind of odd, and I just hated it. I'm so sorry. Like I did hate how that part looked, but it was one of those things that I just decided I needed to accept it. Like I don't love everything I make all the time. I have levels. I usually tell you guys when I'm in love with something, like this is one of my favorite things I've ever built, and I don't ever really put out anything that I hate explicitly, but I do have things that I dislike elements of, and that usually comes down to a game mechanic issue. But then I started thinking, why was I so worried about these stairs? Why can't I just put a ladder? Because in reality, Mama Odie is a spellcaster, so she's gonna use transportulate or whatever it is to get up and down most of the time anyway, and I'm pretty sure she has that spell unlocked. I will double check. But she is not even going to use this ladder to get in and out of this treehouse most of the time anyway, and so I don't even need it. Why not just use the ladder? I'll keep the ladder so that it is accessible, but I can tuck the ladder around the back side of the trunk, and that way it's hidden and it doesn't pop out the way that the stairs did, and that removes a huge element to this that I just aesthetically really didn't like. And then I think once I went into like the little pond bayou area at the bottom and I matched all of the plants up and I cleaned it a little bit, there was again some seeping jungle adventure plants in this build that don't fit and don't look very good at all. It immediately starts to look a lot better and a build that I'm much more satisfied with. Something particularly over like the last 2 years that I've become really obsessed with is plants and picking out correct ones and using like the same ones from the world that I am building in to help make builds look like they fit where I'm putting them, even if they aesthetically don't really make sense for the world. Like this tree house doesn't really make a ton of sense to have it here, and if you were just walking past this would be like a crazy thing to see, but I can hide it and make it blend in really well by doing the same plants that the Sims team used to build Willow Creek in the bayou, in the pond, and around this lot, and it just looks so much better. I used to do plants that like looked like they were from the movie. So if a tree on a lot is supposed to be yellow, I might pick that yellow tree, even though you won't see that yellow tree anywhere else in Willow Creek. But it is not something I really do anymore, and something that I feel like I can easily go back to fix some of my older builds that makes it elevated, makes it look just so much nicer. And it does clean up this build a lot. Now, as far as the interior, I really am mostly happy with it. I did want to go in and just like look at all the clutter, make sure that everything is sitting at the correct levels and that like nothing's floating, just weird stuff like that. And also maybe add in some of the newer packs. But I do that. I don't know if I talk about this very much, but whenever I put out like the new version of the Disney Save download, I probably for the most part have gone back and like added stuff from new packs that I felt like was appropriate for previous builds. I can't do like everything all the time. Like if we get 8 new kits between now and me releasing the new Disney Save download, I can't promise that I'm taking like all 8 of those kits and looking at every single one of my like almost 200 builds and making sure that I like update little clutter things here and there. That kind of stuff kind of happens over time, and especially when I do stuff like this. So while I'm already here and while I'm already really paying attention to the details of Willow Creek, I did want to go in with some of the older packs and just like double check and make sure that there isn't any new clutter. Crystal Creations came out after I made this build, so I added in some like little jewels and jewelry and things like that to this. But other than that, it's not gonna be like a ton of changes. And that's why this video is existing today, because I felt like basically everything in today's video, when I was done with the footage, it didn't make sense to make its own video. And I feel like it might even confuse some people, because there's a lot of elements to all the things I do with the Disney Save that I feel like even now, it might feel like sometimes when you watch my builds that I'm repeating myself, and it's just because I don't know if all of the information of like what I'm working on is getting across perfectly. And I think this is a case of when you are so deep into something, or you are like I don't want to use like the word expert, but what I'm going to compare this to is like, you ever go to a doctor and you feel like the doctor is not really listening to you, and you come in and they kind of already have an opinion of like your diagnosis, and they won't really hear like anything about what, and they already kind of know like what they're going to say and what they're going to tell you. And that's not exclusive to doctors, because this happens in like every field and everything. If you are super knowledgeable into something and almost like over encumbered with information about something, you sometimes forget to express the details and share everything to everyone. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that because I have patrons, because I have like Discords that I update, and I have 2 Discords, and there's constantly a flow of information, I sometimes miss little things sharing here and there. And I forget to tell like this group of people this, or I forget to tell that group of people that. So I'm constantly like battling with myself to try to make sure that I am telling you guys everything, and that is like the repeating information that sometimes comes across. I have been really worried in the background that people are not going to understand why I'm back in Willow Creek and what I'm kind of doing here, and they're wondering like, when's the new world? When is the stuff? Where is the stuff? Why have you not been putting out like new things? And I just keep trying to explain that this is all leading up to my brand new world, Ravenwood. So if ever confused, please comment, ask questions. I will try my best to bring you up to speed. And that's also why I decided to do this compilation video, because I realized that even though a lot of what I'm showing today is not, it's not enough to make their own speed builds out of, and it was going to be like too many videos and too confusing, there was still so much to show, so many little changes that you guys were going to miss. And when I go back to it later, a lot of you were going to be looking at things like, well, when did you move this here? And why is this changed? And where did this go? So this is going to serve as me sharing a lot of that behind the scenes stuff that usually only really gets shown to patrons, and also hopefully like spreading the info so everyone knows the plan. And my hope is that I'm going to be able to explain everything today and kind of show you guys where we are, what map, or what part of the map really, what neighborhood. And what I did is inserted little like named lot pieces so you can tell what lot I'm currently working on if it's not super clear, because I am gonna like transition between the builds here. And I think that in previous videos I had said that I also was going to do some creative sims in this long compilation video, but I just want to say that that's not actually included today really, because I didn't add a ton of new characters or any major changes to Willow Creek. I gave Princess Tiana and Prince Naveen pretty heavy makeovers a few months ago, and I cannot find the footage from when I did that. So I think when I was referencing that I would be including some like character renovations, I was mentioning it because I could remember that I had done that for them. And they both received pretty heavy makeovers, some brand new clothing, some makeup changes, and hair updates specifically for Tiana. And Tiana also desperately needed like more princess dresses, things that were a little bit more tailored to the time period of the movie and things like that. So I'm always kind of keeping an eye on newer things that we're getting in The Sims 4 specifically for her, because I do feel like she needs it, and also Anna and Elsa desperately need it as well. But I didn't record it, I guess, or I can't find the footage from it. So unfortunately in today's Willow Creek Changes video, there aren't going to be any characters, but there is a little bit of creative sim, because as we transition into some of the restaurant builds, I did change some employee uniforms, and when you do that you have to go into creative sim. So I apologize that I missed the mark on that, like I didn't have the recordings available. However, Willow Creek is on a list of things that I am going to be renovating. So this is not our only stop before I transition over to Ravenwood. I know that's probably going to be disappointing for some of you, but I really think that something I've learned at the end of this entire process, now that I'm recording this, I am officially completed with the new renovations for Willow Creek. It came out so much better. Everything looks so correct and so clean and so perfect, and I feel the same way about this world that I felt when I was done with Oasis Springs. It just feels so right and so whole, and I'm glad that I came back to do these changes, because I think it would be really easy to move forward and just keep going and do new worlds. And obviously a new world is also very exciting, and a lot of people want to see it, and they want to see the plans, and they want to know what movies are going to be included. So it would be easy to just keep jumping world to world, but I know that in the back of my head I have things things about my previous worlds that I'm not happy with. And so taking the time to just fix them up a little bit when we get proper packs to do this, when we get new stuff, when I am inspired for new ideas, I think I will occasionally, every few years or so, depending on the lifetime of The Sims 4, take the opportunity to go back and just edit a little bit. But there are certain worlds that I just feel are so finalized and complete, and I feel that way about Willow Creek now. So the time and the effort really has been worth it. And the next world that I'm going to be taking on, so I'll give you guys a little treat if you're watching this very long video today, the next world being renovated in this little renovation series is Forgotten Hollow. Forgotten Hollow was, I think, my third world ever in the Disney save, and I'm not going to spoil too much about the plans and the things that are coming for that, but what I will say is that when I originally did Forgotten Hollow, we did not have a lot of those like occult, darker, creepy worlds. So in my head, it was the only opportunity to do like a Disney villains world and have it make sense. And now we have so many more worlds and so many more things and so many more movies that I feel like I'm going to be able to get into. So I crammed a lot of ideas and a lot of Disney movies into that world in an attempt to cover as much as possible with what I knew at the time to be the limited space that I had available. And it's not that way anymore. So that world is getting a pretty big transition as well. But then after that, I'm doing one final world reno that is not getting as much detail as everything that I have done so far. It will be pretty quick. I'm going to do, I think, one or two newer lots, maybe a replacement lot. I'm not getting into that definitely yet because I don't want to confuse anybody. And then after all of that, I will be doing Ravenwood. And like I've been saying, the reason that I'm really doing this ultimately is because each of the worlds that I am redoing or touching in some regard has a lot that is ultimately going to end up in Ravenwood. So either I'm moving an entire movie, or I had to move stuff out of Willow Creek to put it into a different world, and then that different world is getting its stuff moved to Ravenwood. It's a very long process. I knew it was going to be a ton of work. I knew it was going to take up a good majority of this year for me, but I think it's all going to feel very final at the end, which is the ultimate goal. Moving on to the next speed build in today's video. This one is probably the bulk of the video, to be honest with you guys, and if there was anything featured today that could have been its own video, it is this. This is Duke's Cafe. I was originally not really going to touch this very much. I knew that I was going to be moving it to a brand new neighborhood, so originally this was up in my like commercial district where I also had the Beauty and the Beast library and Tiana's palace, and I ended up moving this to a completely different neighborhood. It is actually currently sitting and being built on what was previously the Maldonia estate, which is Prince Naveen's parents' Louisiana holiday home. Now that home is never shown in any Disney media. It is something that I made up. I think what I did at the time, I really just had basically no ideas for what I was going to put there. I think it might have even been the last lot in Willow Creek, and I couldn't come up with anything. So I decided that it made the most sense for the Maldonians to have some kind of a royal vacation home. And rather than it be a palace, it would be a little bit more in line with something that was built in Louisiana, but very, very rich upper class. And I think I Googled like Louisiana mansions, specifically like New Orleans area, and found one that I liked that was very clean, white polish, and I ended up building that. But ideally, it would have never been included because I don't like to make things where I have to stretch so far to get to the part that it's actually Disney. And it's Disney because the characters live there, but they're so underground characters. They are so like unnamed, unknown characters. I'm pretty sure Prince Naveen's parents do not even have like canonized names in the Disney universe. I think we only get to hear Ralphie, which is his little brother, and at the time my reason for really wanting to include them at all was because I wanted a child in Willow Creek and I wanted to be able to do a playground in Willow Creek. And if there was no child sim, then there was no reason to have a playground. And the world was really filled with like basically Princess and the Frog characters that were all older, young adult, elder characters. So it was my way of bringing in more ages to the save file. And I think I was also really excited about the parents in concept because they fit really well into the political career. And we really don't have in game like any type of system when it comes to royalty. And early on in me like designing the save file, I was trying to figure out how I wanted wanted to handle that, because I think originally when I did the Disney Save, I wanted to try to put everybody into actual jobs that are already in the game. And the longer that this has gone on, the more difficult that this has become. So what I've done over time is basically, if anybody is royalty, they don't actually have a career. I do like a freelance custom career, which is something you can do through the phone UI, and I'll add them to the quote unquote royalty list, where they basically don't have like a real job. And I guess for the Sims, in a sense, that does work. I can give the household a lot of money, and then they don't have like a job that they need to go out to every day, because I think if you are a royal, that almost sort of doesn't make sense. So that's what I've been doing from this, I would say from like the last 2 or 3 years forward. But originally when I had the Maldonians added in, they were put into the political career because I felt like at the time it was the only thing that fit really well in place of royalty. So very long story short, I have always disliked the Maldonian estate. And when I went in to do this renovation, I knew that if there was a way to get rid of it, I was going to be more than happy to do so. And I would keep Naveen's parents and his little brother, but they're going to be townies in Willow Creek now. So I removed their house. I'm currently building Duke's Cafe, which was already built, but now I'm moving it over to this lot, which I think might have been the same size of the lot that it was previously on. And I'm in a new neighborhood in Willow Creek as well. This neighborhood is now the new, mostly Princess and the Frog commercial area of the map. There is one rescuer's lot that ultimately ended up landing here, which was Madame Medusa's pawn shop, is also in this little square. So if you saw that speed build, that is the neighborhood that I'm currently building in. This is also the neighborhood that's going to have Tiana's palace and the crown jewel. And this is also the one where I did the 2 brand new shotgun homes that Eudora, Tiana's mother, lives in. And that makes the 5 lots that fill up this neighborhood. So as for the Maldonia estate, I will not be updating that further. If you like it, I would go snag it off the gallery now and save it, because I'm probably pulling it down. It's never something that I have been like totally in love with, so I'm not going to put any more time or resources into it. I will be maintaining Naveen's parents because they're just going to become townies. So they'll get like little updates over time and little additions, and whenever I do updates for the Disney Save, they will get additional little perks and things put in pending whatever packs are brought out and things like that. Now, as for Duke's Cafe, it got moved from the other neighborhood because this is now the new commercial Princess and the Frog area, and the other one that it was previously in, that older neighborhood, is the Bayou neighborhood. So it didn't really fit, and it made a ton of sense to go ahead and move it over here. And then when I was moving it, I had a look at it and I realized, again, it's such an old build. It's something that I did in the very beginning of the Disney Save. It might be the 3rd or 4th thing I ever built, and I realized that it's not a great movie replica. So I wanted to take the time and the effort to actually make the movie replica how it's supposed to be. I think what I used to do in the old like Disney Save is I would try the best I could, but I have just grown so much as a builder, so I knew I could pull this off. I knew that it needed a layout change. I knew that we had the proper wood textures and some kitchen clutter, and I knew how to do everything that was being shown in the movie now and make it functional. So I rearranged it. I completely like flipped the layout. You used to basically enter from the side of the building, and it had this whole outdoor seating area and this big like patio seating area around the back. Some of that still remains, but I did take a little bit of it away because it was a little too much, to be honest with you. I rewatched all the scenes from Princess and the Frog that take place here. I made sure to get tons of screenshots, and so now as it stands, this is actually a very true movie replica as compared to the film, and it looks so much better. And this also set the tone for what I was going to be using for future Princess and the Frog builds throughout the rest of the video and in the neighborhood and things like that. This is where I discovered that using the Western style horses pack was really going to be vital, and I kind of did a little bit of this when I did Tiana's mansion as well, so I was comfortable carrying it over here. But the reason that it works so well is because it has this sort of like worn in look that a lot of the textures in the movie, when it comes to like wood tones and specifically like furniture and things like that, do have, and we didn't previously have that pack back when I did Duke's Cafe. And that mostly comes into play when it comes to like the floor textures, anything that I do for the ceiling, maybe some of the wall print, although I think in here I am using a base game wallpaper, and it pairs really well with the dine out furniture because some of the stuff that you need for a restaurant, like the cooking station and like the host station and things like that, they only come in like 3 or 4 color swatches, and so they don't usually match up really well with like the aesthetic of whatever you're you're trying to build, but in this case, it matches super well. And Duke's Cafe is a restaurant in the Disney Save, and I always bring this up because I just want to reiterate the reason why. Obviously, doing a cafe should have been the thing that I did, but when you pick a cafe, you cannot pick the menu, and I specifically wanted this to be a little bit more like a real cafe in real life, or I guess not a cafe as much as a diner, because that's very much the vibes here. This has diner written all over it, and when you see some of the characters eating and what they're drinking, it's not a cafe in the way that The Sims portrays them, where you kind of like go in and pick out a pastry from a case and you can get various coffee drinks. Duke's has actual food, and so I wanted to be able to pick like Southern cuisine breakfast options, specifically diner sort of food, and then also specifically beignets. Beignets are not in The Sims 4, but we do have a powdered donut, so that was my replacement for that, and all of that is on the menu. I did take a look at the menu recently as well, and I updated it. So we got, I think there is like one of the packs added small kitchen appliances, like a couple of them, and I think one of them is a waffle maker, and I do not know which kit this comes from or which pack, I am so sorry, but it added a ton of new recipes with it, and you can get all sorts of different waffles that are covered in different things, like fruity waffles, chocolatey ones. So I added pretty much all of those to the menu here because I just felt like it was exactly what I was looking for, like loaded, lavish pancakes, but obviously we have the waffle option in this case. I think currently in the video, I don't have businesses and hobbies installed. I was holding out on it just a little bit. To be honest, I was so nervous about the implementation of small businesses and like what that was going to do to the game, because to me, it looks like they used a very similar UI system that they created as for the rentals in For Rent. And so to me, this is just like my observation, and I'm not claiming that I understand this completely, but it kind of looks like they took the groundwork for the UI that was created for rentals and they used it to repurpose it into the system that they're using for businesses and hobbies. And because For Rent has been so game breaking and The Sims has acknowledged that it is breaking people's save files and they're still working on a solution for that, I was not quick to purchase businesses and hobbies, and I did not want it installed in my game for fear that it was going to cause irreparable damage, especially while I'm already putting in all this work to fix all these old builds. The last thing I really wanted to do was break everything all over again. But I am happy to say that from what I've seen, no one's really been complaining that it like doesn't work. In comparison to For Rent, there were immediately tons of people with bugs and issues saying that it was broken, it doesn't work, it's ruining my game. That is not really the case as far as I've seen with businesses and hobbies. I've seen pretty much no complaints, actually. So after some time passed, I felt comfortable finally putting it in, and it is randomly going to pop up in today's video, and I'm going to randomly start using some of the objects. Some of them I knew were going to be important later for things that I would be working on in like different neighborhoods in the Disney Save, particularly like the Dumbo neighborhood, but I think it's not going to pop up for until we're like out of this neighborhood. However, I did get it. I do love it so far, and this world is getting a small business. You might think to yourself that there is, actually it's getting two. There were a couple of possibilities for like putting small businesses into Willow Creek, but I don't want to go crazy with it. And I think I'm a little bit nervous about like even doing, I just don't want to do too many. People were really excited when it came out, and I immediately got flooded with so many ideas of all these small businesses that could get made, but I don't want like everybody to be a small business, if that makes sense. I don't want every person owning a small business. I think it's way too much. There are so many cool things you could do. Like obviously characters could have small businesses that kind of cater to their hobbies and their interests. And I think that that should be left up to people playing with the Disney Save and what you choose to do with it rather than me like implementing those things. So I'm saving them for when it actually really makes sense to use it. And in Willow Creek, that is going to result in two changes. The Dumbo circus lot, which is going to be featured later on in the video. I did do some little renovations there, I thought it just totally made sense to go ahead and update that as a residential and a business. If I could find a way to implement it really well, and honestly, I haven't done it yet as of recording audio right now, but I did start to set up the parameters of like the employee only tents and the main big tent being the actual circus, and then you have all the food stalls and things. So I'm hoping if I fence things off correctly, I can mark it right and it'll work out as like a business. I don't believe that the options are going to be really available for me to put that in as like a full functioning circus, but I can probably find some things to do that make sense. And then I'm also going to be assigning like the characters that work there as the actual employees for the Dumbo circus. And I believe with that, Timothy, the mouse character from Dumbo that I had put into the save file, I believe as it stands right now, he is currently a teen. And I just kind of did that for age diversity, but also because some of the things that he gets up to with Dumbo in the movie feel very much like childish to me. Like they don't feel like he's a fully fledged adult. However, I think I'm going to be aging him up so that he can actually like properly work at the circus, and that won't be like a huge change, but I thought that I would mention it, as well as Dumbo's mother, and then Mr. Medici, I believe, whatever his name is, the guy who actually owns and runs the circus. He lives there as well, and he will be like the business owner. The second small business is Other Side Nightclub, and I'm going to be doing that as Dr. Facilier's nightclub small business. He was always intended to live on that lot, and he will be getting that updated so that he can properly live there. He has a house over there already, and I kind of had done it in a certain way in the save file that he could live there at least like part-time. It was sectioned off so that the building on the left-hand side where his house was had a door on it that was locked except for a club that he is exclusively in. So there's a little tip if you are looking to do something similar. You can set club restrictions on community lot doors. So if you build like a business and then you lock the door to everybody except this club, that is a way to like filter who goes in and out of that community lot, even if you don't own it. But obviously he's not meant to be there and living there in that way. Like I actually wanted him to properly live there, and that is also featured in today's video, the little bit of renovating that I did at Other Side, so that'll be talked about more later on. I think the reason I'm bringing up small businesses is because you might wonder why I didn't make Duke's Cafe a small business. Number one, I didn't really want to change the menu, and there is an issue with trying to run like a small business that's also a restaurant. I believe you could do something in regards to that and like kind of have characters maybe even serve food from like a cafe station or something, but you can't pick the menu and it's not going to function the way that like a restaurant functions. Otherwise, what would be the need for Dine Out anymore as a pack? So I think The Sims specifically did that on purpose. They didn't want you to be able to create a small business that was a fully functioning restaurant, because then you don't need to buy Dine Out anymore. So anybody who goes in late game to The Sims 4 and wants to go back and buy some of the older packs, they're going to have no reason to go and get that pack anymore. So they didn't really do it that way. It doesn't work fully. And the second reason really is just that I would have had to have somebody that owns the restaurant, and the only person would be Duke himself, which I believe is the chef that is shown in Princess and the Frog. And I could have added him in, but he was just another like random character, especially those unknown characters that don't get a ton of screen time and people aren't going to easily recognize. And I felt like he was an unnecessary additional character that I would have to maintain at this point. Like I cannot understate the fact that now that I track in like a Google spreadsheet all of my Sims across the Disney save, and I'm talking about like all Sims, all bonus Sims, all townies, everything that I make, I am well over 500 or 600 Sims in the Disney save currently, and I am not even done with half the worlds in the roster. So I don't need to make Duke from Princess and the Frog, because at a certain point it just becomes too much. Like you have to think about the fact that every time we get a new Sims pack, I have to go through that pack and think to myself, okay, is there anything in this pack that means I need to go back and update one of my 600 plus characters? And then I have to figure out which of those characters like need it or what immediately comes to mind. And it's too much. Like at a certain point, it's way too much for any one person to handle and keep track of. And I am unfortunately too much of a perfectionist to just like let it go and not update Sims and let them be eternally what they are at the end of creating them. I always want to go back and like tweak them a little bit. And I think people appreciate when I do that. And I also get a ton of comments from from people just asking when new packs come out, are you going to be going back and changing and fixing this? So again, it would be really easy to just not do that, but I do that. So I am trying to limit some of those weird external characters that I really don't need to have, and there's ways to like avoid having them. So Duke's Cafe is actually huge, as you can see. The cafe part, the little restaurant, not so big, and on its own would have been even difficult to place in this neighborhood because most of the lots here are actually rather large, so it works out to have it here. But even looking at it, I'm like, yeah, this is way too big. I need to tone this back. And the way that I did it is ultimately going to come from removing some of that foundation, some of that outdoor seating, and some of the back part of the patio area. Like I said, I am keeping a little bit of it, but I really felt like it was just too much, and I wanted to make this lot feel like it fit better into the neighborhood. You will notice that I'm building on like the corner, and it is like the end part of the neighborhood, kind of facing two roads on the little corner there. So I wanted it to feel like it fit really well into that corner. And the reoccurring theme, and the thing I'm going to keep mentioning throughout the entire video, is that my biggest thing with the Willow Creek renovation was changing out as many plants as possible to try to get the plants to match from the surrounding area. And as you go to different neighborhoods, those plants do change slightly. Like there are certain trees that you will or will not see depending where you are on the map. So wherever we are, I'm looking around and I'm pulling those trees and those plants out of debug to use on the lots. And that's going to help make all of the lots in a given neighborhood feel more cohesive with one another, even if they're from different movies, or even if the theming is kind of like far between the two things. For example, considering that this is a commercial neighborhood, having Eudora's house be in it could feel a little jarring and could feel like it doesn't look very good or make sense. But I'm telling you, it looks perfectly fine and normal. Number one, because people do live kind of like in commercial areas, it's not completely unheard of. But number two, because I used a lot of plants and carried over a lot of like the community debug pieces. So trash cans, mailboxes, seating, and I made sure to replicate the same group of stuff throughout a given neighborhood so that everything, as you sort of like pan around, looks very clean and authentic. The same street lights, whatever it is, whatever is already there existing. Or if I pick something, like if I want to use a particular bench, I use that bench on all of the lots in this neighborhood so that it just all fits together. The other thing to obviously mention, in particular with Duke's Cafe, is that it's attached to another building. And this is done intentionally because of kind of the style of building that I am recreating from New Orleans, but also Duke's is shown from the outside in Princess and the Frog, and you can see that it's on some kind of like a little city block where the buildings do touch one another. So it's combined into a longer set of buildings, and to just build it on its own might have looked a little bit funny. So I wanted to build something attached to it so that it looked a little bit closer to the movie. And that always existed since the very first version of Duke's Cafe that I ever made. I've always had it attached to this building on the left of it. But the change is that that building has always been empty. And I think in my head, I always canonized that that was probably an apartment complex of some kind. And this was long before we had The Sims 4 rentals. And obviously, like I keep saying, I am not putting rentals in the save file as of right now. Even if I was putting rentals in, it wouldn't work for this particular lot because I have it attached to the restaurant, and the primary look and the primary use of the building is to use Duke's for what it is. But I really don't like leaving buildings blank anymore. I think I used to do this because, one, a little bit lazy, right? Like doing a whole world and then you do this like building attached to another building and it becomes too many builds inside of a larger one. So after I did all of Duke's originally, I probably didn't want to like fully furnish an apartment building, but I did this time. You're welcome. It's much better now. It's cleaner, it's nicer, it flows, it looks just like an apartment complex should. It has like a little office downstairs where there's like lots of little filing cabinets and computers, and it's clearly a space that the staff comes into inside the building. There is a public mailbox system and some lobby areas. It's actually a really nice apartment, if I do say so myself. There are options in the building. There are like multiple flat studios with just like no bedrooms. There are some that are multiple bedrooms for families. They do have sort of repetitive furniture throughout the entire thing. I decorated it with the mindset of like keeping the item limit lower, or as low as I possibly could, considering that it's kind of just for decoration. But it's also, you could optionally change this lot to be a residential if you like needed another one for storytelling or for gameplay inside of Willow Creek. It's really up to you. Like, you could just get rid of Dukes in a sense and ignore it and change to the lot type. You could change it to a rental yourself. And other than like laying out yourself where all of the different apartments are, it would be a really big, nice apartment complex that's already completely renovated for you. So there you go. It's there. I actually cannot remember how much of the footage from the apartment I really included in the video today. There might be some, but that really wasn't the point. It's just kind of decoration, and it's not really like Disney in any regard. Like, I didn't theme the apartment. I didn't make anything in particular. It is kind of just like a build. So I don't believe I included too much of that. But that also sort of adds to the idea that it doesn't seem strange anymore that Eudora's house is the only one in this neighborhood, because Dukes has a apartment complex next to it as well. So if this was like a real functioning neighborhood, there are multiple living situations in this immediate area, and that helps the neighborhood feel a lot more appropriate as well. I did keep some of that outdoor seating at Duke's Cafe. There are a couple of tables around the back that you can choose, and I think in the movie they do show this as well. Like, you can see people eating outside of the cafe. Also inside, because of the way that the tables are laid out, you might feel a little crammed in certain circumstances depending on how characters sit down, and obviously that's like kind of conducive to the idea of a diner in general, so I didn't really mind it. But there you go, you have the option. If you don't know this, when you go to a restaurant, if you want your sim to like sit in a particular area, instead of going up to the host stand and requesting a table, you can go up to the table and click on it and say request this table, so that when you're trying to set the scene, if you want your sim in a particular area of one of my restaurants or anything really, you can actually pick where you want to be sat. You don't have to leave it up to chance per the game. I do want to take a little bit of time to talk about the Sims 4 potential fairies situation that is going on and is so on my radar in the Sims community news right now. I am always itching, waiting, listening for some news about fairies being added to the Sims 4. So rest assured, when the rumors started being less rumors and more leaks recently, I was the first to know. I promise you. I wasn't literally the first to know, but I am always like very much paying attention to any news related to fairies, because getting fairies for the Disney save would be such a huge deal. There are so many spellcasters in the save file currently that really should be fairies, and there are so many fairy characters that I have not made that I have been kind of waiting and avoiding those movies because I wanted just fairies to be available. There are characters that I would change. There are things I am so excited for, and I'm not going to get into like specifically the leaks necessarily because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but basically the long story short of it all, there is a company that puts out occasionally packs early for sale, and they have been known in the past to do this, and that pack ends up being real. And this happened I think a couple weeks ago at this point, so this is a little bit old news, which is why I feel comfortable talking about it, but it alluded that it was going to be some kind of a fairy pack. The only issue that I have with this is that the description and the things that they were specifically talking about the pack included really did scare me, and I'll tell you, I'm not gonna like go through the description because again, I don't want to like talk about the leak, but I am gonna say one thing. There was a little bit of like a blurb in the description that implied that the fairies pack could potentially be a like eco-industrial leaning pack, and I would be the most sad of anybody in the community if they decided to go eco-industrial once again. I feel like we get this theme constantly. We have a whole world dedicated to it with Evergreen Harbor, and then from that point they have sprinkled eco-industrial into so many stuff packs, so many kits, and to have like the fairy world, like if we got a whole world with this pack for an occult that is so whimsical, so magical, and there are so many cool things things that they could do with fairies, because I've seen this like debate of, well, why would we even get fairies because they're so close to spellcasters? No, there's so many things that could be done specifically with fairies that I will talk about to have that be turned into some kind of like a gardening eco-industrial pack. Gardening doesn't bother me, but the eco side would. No thank you. I really hope that the description in the leak was not real and or AI generated, or they had some of the information and so they just kind of filled the rest in. I don't know. Or maybe they have done it in a very tasteful way. I am obviously speaking from somebody who has not seen this pack yet. So it could be done in a way that I'm not even like conceptualizing, but I am saying that it scared me. I do not want my fairies world to be covered in like little gardening factories and eco-style industrial greenhouses and factory conversions. Oh my God. The way that that would just be so ruined. Now, besides that, if we get fairies that are like whimsical little magical elves, the way that 99.99% of the community wants and hopes to see, my biggest wish with fairies would be sort of if they went in the direction of like Tinkerbell-esque, and I mean like Pixie Hollow fairies that are magically dedicated per like elements would be really, really cool. If you could pick a fairy and then that fairy can branch into different magical tiers that are nature-based. So you have your animal fairies, your snow fairies, and maybe even like something kind of like a Tinker Fairy, although I don't expect them to completely go that far, but even a water fairy. Like, to have those elemental differences would really help distinguish it from a spellcaster. And I do expect them to use like a lot of the base of what they created for spellcasters, like the UI, the way that you do magic, the way and the animations that they already have in game. Like, it's very, very common for them to repeatedly sort of like pull some of those things over, especially considering how old the spellcasters pack is at this point. But I hope that they go in the direction of elements. I hope that there is some kind of a good fairy and an evil fairy. It would have been so cool if they had done something like that for mermaids, where you could make like a mermaid and then a siren and have there be like more of an evil dynamic element to it, so you can pick like routes and choices and things that kind of determine your powers to be a little bit more on the evil side. And then obviously in my head, an ideal world, and I don't expect this to be like, honestly, I think that if we do get a world, it's going to be probably on the smaller side. Like, you have to think about all of the occult worlds that we've gotten so far, when they did werewolves, when they did vampires, and those are like dedicated game packs that are for those specific things. So it could be different if they are included in like an expansion pack, for example, if it's not just like The Sims 4 fairies, but it's a part of a bigger pack. Although I would argue, I would hope that they don't do that, because they did that to mermaids and it really didn't work out. When we do get occult worlds like vampires and werewolves, I think both of those worlds are only 5 lots, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're kind of created off the same like UI system. So if they were going to do that, I would hope that it would be like a little bit more just dedicated to the fairies, Tinkerbell based, very spread out, very like no modernization in the world whatsoever, very whimsical, lots of mushrooms and glowing things and weird plants that are specifically created for that world that are like weirdly colored and glow funny, kind of Alice in Wonderland vibes, obviously kind of Pixie Hollow vibes. If they give us like a much larger thing than that, a much larger world, then hopefully it is a little bit more based on the fairies and not on like the expansion pack itself. My ultimate fear here is that they're going to get the mermaids treatment, which is that they are being added to the game, but they're being included in a pack where the focus is not necessarily the occult and more so the world and the functions of the world, and that function is designed to work better for the Sims that live there that are just normal Sims, which is what Sulani is. And mermaids, unfortunately, get a little bit of the runaround. They're very cool, they're very pretty, and they're some of my favorite occults to make when I create them for the Disney save, but because fairies are so much more pivotal and important to the Disney save than mermaids are, I just want them to get like the full special treatment, and I am nervous that that's not what we're going to be getting. Now, update to all of that, after all of that came out, the leak and everything, there was a teaser that was released recently, and that teaser was a tiny little fairy house on a stool that was animated with lights and music and a mushroom in the background, and it looks beautiful. It's exactly what I am hoping the direction that they took to the pack is going to be. I cannot wait to see what fairy Sims look like. I cannot wait to see if there are wing options, decorations, the clothing that could potentially come with the pack. I am holding my breath. I am on the edge of my seat. This is a very, very exciting pack for the Disney Save. And the problem really is right now, unfortunately, is that it looks like we are for sure getting fairies, but also there's probably a new world coming, and I am in the middle of a huge renovation that's going to take the next few months, but I am obviously so ready to just immediately jump into the fairies world. It's not even funny. So I am kind of the mindset that I could potentially stop the renovations and just jump into the fairy world. I don't know if I will be doing that, but I think it's safe to say that if the fairy world does come out and it's not a complete mess, that after Ravenwood, I probably will be doing it, either of my own choice, but I think even if I leave the choice up to my patrons, they're all going to vote for the fairy world. It's not even a question. Like, we as a community have all been talking about this behind the scenes for a very long time, and like the changes that would be made to the Disney Save and what would come, and if we just got a fairy world, if we had fairies, and yada yada, like everything we would do with them. If you didn't know, a feature that I offer for my patrons is that they typically get to pick the newest world whenever it's time in the Disney Save, and they chose Ravenwood, but I think that if I ran a poll, they would literally laugh. Like, it's so beyond unserious. We are definitely picking the fairies world, so you can expect that in the somewhat near future. I also have been really itching, and I've been talking about this forever, to do a city-based world, and I was all but set to do one until like a major glitch came to The Sims 4 that kind of stopped me from doing it. So that once again would delay that for me, but it's okay. Something that has been kind of in the back of my head and is always, whenever we get a new world in The Sims 4, my patrons in my patron only Discord, we will kind of have a chat about the potential for what we could do in that new world. And we, with The Sims 4 Businesses and Hobbies, got a new world called Nordhaven, and it is a really tough one to place. So if you have any movie recommendations, Disney movie recommendations for Nordhaven, I would love to hear them. I have been kind of thinking about it. It's not on the radar of like to do, so I'm not doing any planning. It's not like it has been voted for or picked in any regard, but even when my patrons and I did like a little bit of brainstorming about it, it's a really tough movie to place because I think the only one in the Disney roster that like kind of explicitly goes in Nordhaven is Frozen. And the reason I am like not budging on moving Frozen, because I did Frozen in Mount Komorebi, is because Nordhaven doesn't have any snow-based lots. And if we got like a new world that was snowy or had a lot of permanently snowy lots, I could definitely see moving Frozen out of Mount Komorebi, but I don't want to move it into Nordhaven. It won't fit. The castle won't fit. There's nowhere to put it. And I, other than Frozen, kind of don't really know what to put there. So I would love to hear community recommendations or community thoughts on that. There have been some that come up, but then I think about other worlds, and then I think to myself, well, this would actually go better here, or this would actually go better there. So it's really hard. Like, there's nothing that explicitly pops right out at me as something that could go there or could fill up that world, because it is like, I think 12 lots or so. Thoughts on that? Very much appreciated in the comments. Moving on to the next build, still in the same neighborhood. This is a renovation on Tiana's palace. From everything this point forward, going to be much shorter, especially when we get to the next neighborhood. These were kind of my largest renos in this given neighborhood right now. Tiana's palace, when I went into it, I thought to myself, it really isn't going to need that many changes. I did have a couple of goals going in. I really wanted to change the interior of this to make it reflect the version from Disney Dreamlight Valley a little bit better, because I feel like, obviously, given that we have that video game now and we didn't when I originally did Tiana's palace, it gives a more proper layout, a better look at like the wall textures, the colors, the brick, the gold trimming, the particular plants that are in there, that was even better and like definitely more easy for me to replicate compared to the movie. The movie is obviously the reference and the most perfect reference, but when you have Disney Dreamlight Valley reference, the reason I really love using it is because they're essentially doing the work for me. They're taking this thing, this IP or building or whatever it is that Disney has already created, and typically speaking, they're going to take that and condense it down into a different art style, a video game form, something where you think about like characters having to move and walk around in it. It's a different format of the same thing, and because I am also recreating these pieces in a video game format, they are usually easier recreations, and when they take like little details away or they focus really heavily on other particular things, and so my brain kind of is like, yeah, that is an important detail to carry over, it is a much easier replication. And I realized that I kind of had the coloring wrong in here, and to go with like the darker wood tones, the Western pack, again, the horses pack, I keep calling it the Western pack, but you guys know what I mean. And particularly the red exposed brick as the wallpaper and the gold trimming, I added all of that in. The green tables, it's a much, much better replica of specifically the Disney Dreamlight Valley version, but it also ends up turning out to just looking a lot nicer. It's a lot more colorful in here, a lot more bright. And the other main thing is that I wanted the kitchen moved to the bottom floor. And if you go back and watch my original Tiana's Palace speed build from way back in the day, which I don't recommend anybody do, by the way, but if you do, you will probably hear me talk about in that video that I am bummed that I couldn't figure out a way to get the kitchen on the bottom floor. It always bothered me that I had to put it on the top floor. And this isn't completely unheard of, especially now that I live in London. I have realized that more often than not, living in London, if you go out to a restaurant, it is very common for the restaurant's kitchen to not be on the main dining floor, either in the basement or the floor above, as well as the bathrooms. In America, this is not as common, and so I never loved it. I never thought that it was like the right move, but I used to build these massive builds that were just way too big, and Tiana's Palace suffered from that. So in my head, there was no room for it because I needed to have like 20 tables on the bottom floor, and even this is a ton of tables, so I didn't need to have all that. I ended up adding to both sides of the main dining floor the platform seating that is shown in Dreamlight Valley, and then I also managed to get the kitchen off to the right hand side. And this created more issues than I thought it would, because you have to think about the fact that everything needs to remain even. So when you walk in the building, the front door should line up straight to the stage on the back. And both of the platforms off to the side with the seating should be like the same amount of tiles, and they should be even with the stage. But then you're adding the kitchen to the bottom floor, and it sits on like this bump out on the side of the building. And it immediately created a little bit of an issue because everything was like slightly off in one direction or another. The windows, all of the pillars, the columns, the outside in particular, making sure that the building looked even from the outside. And I had to like adjust everything in this build. So I thought it was just going to be one of those quick ones that I go in, I change the color, I add some different lighting and stuff like that. And I knew I was going to be doing a kitchen reno, which was kind of a bummer because the kitchen upstairs was big and it was functional, and so I didn't really want to redo the kitchen. But all of that aside, I ended up having to like shift the entire building in different directions. And as an added challenge, one of the reasons that the kitchen was never on the bottom floor to begin with was because that's where I had the staircase. And the staircase leads upstairs to like a rafter type situation where you can look down onto the main dining floor, and there is a private booth area up there for maybe celebrity dining or private dining, and it has its own little VIP suite upstairs. So now I had to figure out where can I put the stairs that it's not impeding on this bottom floor layout and not making it uneven yet again, but I can't put it where the kitchen goes. So what I ultimately ended up doing is I initially thought maybe I'll try and add the stairs kind of to that right hand side, but it was going to create a pathing issue if you sat there or if you had a table there. I think it would have blocked the ability to use the stairs. So as the compromise, what I did, Tiana's Palace has always had two entrances in my version. There's the main door that you go through, and then there is the side entrance that goes to the VIP suite. And now that is the only way to the second floor, which makes sense because there's no kitchen up there anymore. So picture it like this. If you went to Tiana's Palace and you wanted to just go and sit and like enjoy the show on the bottom floor, you would just go through the main front door and nothing to be changed for you there. If you wanted to book like a VIP dining or a private room for a birthday party or whatever, then you would call the restaurant and you would tell them that that was the case, and they would say to you, okay, when you get here, there is a side entrance. It's for VIPs only. Enter through the side of the restaurant. And then you would just walk around the building. And that is not a crazy idea compared to real life. So I was okay with the compromise. The only other choice would have been to put the stairs on like the main floor somewhere. And I also did toy with that for a long time and it didn't look very good. So this works out. I also made sure to change out all of the tables in here. I always really wanted to have it be more based on like the green colors of Princess Tiana's dress. And I wanted the plants to be prevalent in here, and I think they were in the original version, but I had used like a lot of base game plants that I really just don't use, to be honest. So I replaced it with these ones, and I believe these might be from Dine Out, so they are like an earlier potted plant. Don't quote me on that though, I'm not sure on the pack on that particular item, but they are almost so spot on to the ones that they created for Dreamlight Valley, so it really, really does work. There is a little bit of a rumor in the Sims community that a bands themed pack is on the horizon. I totally agree. I think the signs have been there for a very long time, and my hope is that we get a couple of new instruments. Obviously, I think that they could do a band pack where they basically focus on what we already have in game, because obviously guitars and singing and even playing piano might be like some of the top instruments in correlation with like bands. It depends on the direction they take it, but I am hopeful that they will at least add a drum set. I think that is like obviously what needs to come in a pack like that, but I'm hoping for more instruments. Like even a tambourine would be so cool, and there's so many that they could do. Obviously a saxophone, like an actual real functioning one, and the hint might even be there because in Businesses and Hobbies they included the boxed framed one that hangs on the wall, so they already created the mesh for the saxophone, so we could definitely see it. If that comes into play, this is definitely one that I would come back to and try and update a little bit. I would definitely want to add a drum set to the stage, and definitely a saxophone if they added something like that, but any new like sort of bandy kind of items, musical sort of items could potentially go in this stage area. Although I'm hoping, and like kind of the goal is that with all of these renovations, I might not have to come back so often to Willow Creek in particular, and I always do like the little pack updates like I've mentioned, but I am hopeful that like I really don't have to come back and do anything crazy, because really when I've gone through like these builds, I haven't found that I'm missing too many pieces anymore. Usually when I do a build, I'll think to myself, or sometimes I even tell you guys, if we had this item, it would have really finished the build off. But we have like almost everything that I felt like was needed for Willow Creek at this point. I don't feel like I'm walking away from any of the builds incomplete or missing anything, and obviously there will always be those little details and those small additional changes and pieces, but that is much different. Like popping in a new clutter item or putting a drum set onto the stage and then not having to change literally anything else is much different than the project I took on by doing the Willow Creek renovation. And like I mentioned, the VIP private dining room from the original version of Tiana's Palace does remain. It has been updated to match all of the colors that I've pulled into the rest of the build, and I gave it a little bit of a gallery wall and like a sit down piano. There was always a grand piano in here, but I felt like this one was a little bit more authentic to the time period for like what you would see in here comparatively with like the jazz music and things. This is meant to be a private suite, but you can still have access to the performances, because I think that's something that really distinguishes Tiana's Palace from the Crown Jewel. The Crown Jewel does not have a stage and it doesn't have any live music, so having that even in the private dining suite I felt like was appropriate. Because of the new layout and the little shifting I had to do to make everything even, right behind the kitchen you will notice that there is a small secondary private dining space. There is a microphone that I popped in there thinking that maybe you could have a private singer, and it's much smaller. The other reason that I like to do sometimes the additional like private dining is so that I can pop in a larger table if you come in with a big party and you want to sit somewhere in here. You're not going to be able to sit on the main floor. I think those bottom ones seat 4 customers, so if you have any more than 4 for some reason, you're gonna have to do private dining, and doing those little like rooms with the larger tables doesn't ruin the floor plan, so that you like it doesn't aesthetically have a different table and look funky, but you still get the option of doing larger parties, larger families. Or you could do like a romantic date in there. I could picture like hiring a singer and like enjoying a cozy little romantic evening. I feel like Tiana's Palace would offer things like that. And then when it comes to the kitchen, really great news. I have Disney Dreamlight Valley once again as a reference. This kitchen is used in the game. It's very important for feeding the customers in the restaurant, but like you get a basically complete layout and I get to see all the details of the clutter on the wall. The thing about Dreamlight Valley though is that it's obviously a more simplified version of probably what this kitchen looks like in the movie. So I did have to change it a little bit and like clutter things up just a little bit here and there and add some additional like particularly wall clutter, but it's also very clearly a super elegant fine dining experience. Like her restaurant is absolutely one of the best in New Orleans. There's no doubt about it. And you would probably expect a nicer, cleaner, more simple kitchen. It wouldn't be like Duke's Cafe where you've got like pots and plates and pans all all over the place, and maybe even a little bit of like mess or food on the floor. I would imagine this kitchen is clean and pristine and has the basics and has the utensils for cooking and nothing else. Like no weird writing on the wall of like notes, sticky notes, recipes. I would imagine that she keeps a very tight shift, professional chefs that don't have to reference recipes very often. They have everything memorized. I also think it's interesting that at the end of the film, she is shown serving Naveen's parents and her mother in the restaurant. And I always thought to myself, well, shouldn't she be cooking? Like, she loves to cook, right? That's like kind of one of her things. And I know she wants to run and own the restaurant, and that is also her thing. But I feel like she might even cook herself too. So if the owner is in the kitchen cooking alongside you, you are going to be on your best behavior. Everything's going to be clean, nice, and neat to the best that a kitchen can possibly be. I did do a little bit of adjusting to the menu at Tiana's Palace. I just wanted to make sure that it was like true Southern cuisine, and I don't pretend to be an expert, but I do think that I'm a little bit more knowledgeable on these types of things as comparison to when I originally did the menu. So I just wanted to go through, double check, make sure that I don't have any like strange Italian dishes or anything like that on the menu. No strange to the dish, by the way. I love Italian food, but I'm trying to get more of an authentic experience because I think that that is what Tiana's Palace specifically would offer. Like at the end of the day, she would have a beautiful fine dining experience, but it would also be absolutely the best food in town and like a true authentic Southern menu. I did think a little bit about, obviously, gumbo has to be included, and I do think we have that in the catalog, but I also wanted there to be seafood is especially important, and then there's like traditional Southern cuisine, especially when it comes to desserts that I was thinking about. So I just went through and updated everything real quick to the best of my ability. And then comparatively to the Crown Jewel, which I am going to be switching over to momentarily here, but the Crown Jewel is supposed to be like the knockoff Tiana's Palace. So I wanted to refresh myself with the Tiana's Palace menu so that when I got over to the Crown Jewel, I could have another look at the menu over there and make sure that the menus were similar, but that the Crown Jewel feels more like a copycat. And the way that I did this, and some of you may agree or disagree with my choice to do this here, and no shade to anybody who eats a particular way or whatever, this is not supposed to be tea, but a real true macaroni and cheese that has like full butter, full cheese, full fat, especially a Southern style mac and cheese, is probably in 99% of circumstances going to taste a lot better and a lot more authentic than a chickpea mac and cheese, which is something that is offered in the Sims 4 catalog. And a lot of them have that, where they will have like a substitute option, whether it is a vegan choice, a dairy-free choice, whatever it may be. There are some dishes in the catalog that offer like sort of that replacement option, and although they can be done well, they are usually not as good. So I think specifically Tiana's Palace has like mac and cheese, and then the Crown Jewel has chickpea mac and cheese. And that was my way of being like, okay, similar idea, but not executed the same way, and therefore a little less authentic. I also did this in other ways, like with the pies, for example. I just picked flavors that I felt like were a little bit more traditionally Southern. Like I picked like the banana pie and the apple pie, and then I think the Crown Jewel has like raspberry randomly, whereas like I would like any of those, like raspberry, apple, everything's great. But if you think about Southern food, an apple pie comes to mind. The other major change between the two menus, Tiana's Palace offers nectar, and I added like a bunch of different flavors. And then something that was kind of funny that I changed at the Crown Jewel, they now only offer purple drinks, because in my head, the Crown Jewel is canonically some kind of scheme by Dr. Facilier, and when I think of him, I think of purple drinks, or I guess like spellcastery, potion-y type of drinks. So all of the cocktails on the menu over at the Crown Jewel are purple, and that's why. Last little touch when updating Tiana's Palace, I didn't know what direction originally to go with when it came to doing the staff uniforms for this place. And then rewatching the movie so much recently that I have been doing for the renovations of Willow Creek, I realized that the answer was sitting right in front of me, because at the end of the film, Prince Naveen is serving food at Tiana's Palace. So he is wearing exactly what the waiters are supposed to be wearing. I don't know why I never caught that detail. I think because in the scene you're obviously supposed to focus on Tiana, and she is also serving, but she's serving family. So I feel like she would just be doing that as like a moment of like, welcome to my restaurant. Of course, she's going to be present and kind of like doing something that maybe she otherwise wouldn't serve at the restaurant. But Naveen is most definitely serving, and he's dressed in a different outfit that he wears comparatively to the rest of the film. So I replicated the waiters, both male and female, off of his uniform. They wear exactly the same thing. And then I changed the host to be a little bit more of an elegant, creamy white dress, long sleeves, something that feels like it could start to branch earlier into the time period, or better into the time period rather, than what I had chosen before. And it kind of resembles something that she is wearing in the film, Tiana is wearing in that scene as well. But I didn't want to pick the green because when I did her redo recently, I changed her main outfit to actually be very similar to that dress, that green one that she wears at the last scene of the movie. And I did that because Dreamlight Valley puts her in that dress as like her casual everyday wear rather than obviously her ball gown, which she would not strut around town in. So since they picked that as like her everyday look, I wanted to do something similar, and I didn't want the waitresses to be wearing the same, or the hostess to be wearing the same thing that Tiana wears around town, if that makes sense. Especially with like my Disney princess characters, I really try to make sure that all of their main outfits are very significant to them, because you're going to see them all the time, and I feel like they're characters that people will gravitate towards and they will choose and they will play with more often than some of my other ones. So if I repeat main outfits for like the Greek gods, that's not as big of a deal in my head as when you see all the Disney princesses together. You don't want anybody wearing the same look, especially not as their everyday wear. And then once that is like locked into that character, I really try not to like replicate those pieces too often, depending on what it is. There are certain skirts and things in the game that I have to use over and over again, because especially with the princess characters, they just fit and work really well to piece things together for them. But other than that, when usually I pick like a dress out for a certain character, that becomes like the Tiana dress. Now for a much shorter renovation, the crown jewel. This didn't have a lot of changes to be made, simply because the only really big thing I wanted to do here was just clean it up a little bit, is what I call this, and make sure that the plants surrounding it matched the rest of the neighborhood. So a lot of the builds from this point forward are going to be like less full-scale renovations and more just me refitting and situating them to the lot that they're getting moved to, and then making sure that I am touching up the interior with any new items or just toning things back in general. Or I don't know, I have a little bit of a different decorating style now, a more simplified one. I used to really think that everything needed to be fully cluttered, not a wall naked, everything has to have something to it, and now I don't feel like that's necessary, and it can almost look to be too much and too gaudy. So even a place like the Crown Jewel, which if you're not familiar with what this is a knockoff Tiana's Palace, because it is like the evil version of Tiana's Palace. It's the version that never ended up existing because Princess Tiana does not take the deal from Dr. Facilier in the movie to have him help her make a restaurant, and she is shown a preview of what that restaurant would look like, and this is a recreation of that entire like dream sequence, if you will. In my head, canonically, this is just a competitive restaurant to Tiana's. It's trying to use some of that success of Tiana's Palace. I could almost imagine that this is something that kind of happened after the events of Princess and the Frog, where she now has her restaurant. Her story has kind of ended, but maybe the evil forces of New Orleans or Dr. Facilier, although I think he's like not alive by the end of the film, is still doing things to try to harm her. And now it's not Big Daddy that is like the target of this harm, it's her, because she would also become a really big important figure and a celebrity, and a royal at that lives in New Orleans. She would become like the overnight sensation. Can you imagine if something similar happened in real life? She would be the it girl, the most popular important person in town overnight immediately. So this is trying to like build off of the success of her. It's right next door. It's an opportunity to add some drama to the save file, to do something that is a little bit different. I'm always trying to like sprinkle in different storylines, things to do. Jumping off points is what I call them. If you are somebody that likes the Disney save, but you don't like want to run through the story of the characters, you maybe even want to play it more of like a once upon a time kind of scenario where all the characters live together and there's drama that sparks because of that is completely new. This is a story that you could play inside Willow Creek if you need something to like jump off of. And I think my first version of the crown jewel is a little bit much. I have maybe too many pieces of gold trimming, and I didn't love the curtains. I wanted to replace those with some newer ones. I think that those actually come from the Circus storybook kit, that little children's room kit. I had the right idea, and I didn't change the layout in here. I didn't change any of the main things. I just changed some colors around and added some, I don't know, little decor pieces here and there. I also took some things away from the outside. It is supposed to be the same building as Tiana's palace because they're both like that same building she wants to purchase, and then it gets converted into like this factory converted style restaurant, but in two different ways. So it has a similar layout. It has that bottom floor where most of the dining is. It has the kitchen off to the right, although the kitchen here at the crown jewel is a little bit bigger. Even the main dining floor is a little bit bigger, but they don't have the platform seating. They don't have the stage at the back. You can see the stairs is actually at the back. And I think this would be in an attempt to be very impressive when you first walked in. Like if this just popped up in town kind of overnight randomly and you and your family went here to try out the new restaurant in town, you would walk in here and see the gold trimming and the huge ballroom layout style dining floor and just be like, wow, what a beautiful, lavish experience, right? Like this would be crazy to walk into. You would be like, this is so pretty. But the point is kind of that you would be almost tricked because you walk in and you're like, wow, this is gorgeous. And then you sit down and the wait staff is probably a little bit rude and they probably burn your food. Like the food is definitely not as high quality as it is over at Tiana's palace. So everything is meant to look a little bit nicer so that you are roped into the idea of trying to go here and maybe making it your new favorite spot in town and having the success that Tiana's has. But then after a little while, you would just definitely be put off by it because you would be able to tell that it's not going to be as good of an experience as an authentic homegrown chef and person that like really knows and understands the cuisine of the area, the aesthetics of the area. And I could ultimately see this restaurant failing would be like, I think where I would go with it in my head. If you wanted to fully run it, you could, maybe even as Dr. Facilier, that's definitely an option. He is going to be getting a new small business with Other Side, but he can have, I think you can have a restaurant and a small business. Don't quote me on that. It's just an option. It's just something that's here for playability if you want it. And it really was originally an idea filler for this world, but I love it. It's unique to this world. I usually do put at least one restaurant in my larger worlds especially, and I think people don't always love that I do that because people don't love that restaurants are a little iffy on the functionality, but I usually design them for them to function. Like I will tell you guys if the restaurant doesn't work. I would never make something and then put it out and have it not work. My only one that is like a little bit sketchy is Harryhausen's over in Mount Komorebi is a little bit iffy sometimes about how well it functions. And I've been very clear about that since I created it, and I've done tons of play testing over there, and I can't quite work out what the problem is. And this is like specific to everyone's game, so just because I say it works when you play it in your game, it might not, and I totally recognize that. But I have had people say that they don't even use dine out or restaurants at all because they've never gotten a restaurant to function in their game, and I'm so like, what is going on that is the case for you? If that's the case for you, please let me know because I prioritize restaurants in the Disney save. I think they're such a fun experience to add, and they are like a lot type that in my larger worlds I will always include because I think it's a really great way to represent culture of the movies that I'm putting into the area. And I make them so different from one another. Like every world that has one, the menu is very specific and it's usually based on whatever culture the Disney movies of that world are based on, and I do that specifically. Something you're gonna notice through all of today's updates is the repetitive use of the floor outdoor patio texture that I am putting onto all the outside pathing around, especially my community lots in particular. And it's supposed to be a match to the one that the sidewalk is made out of in Willow Creek. But funny enough, we don't have one in the catalog that is actually the same as that front sidewalk, just like perfectly square, light tan looking sidewalk path. path. There isn't that one in the catalog to use, but there's one that's like kind of close to it, and it doesn't line up exactly with like the squares, so it's not perfect by any means, but it's the best I could do. And again, it's that idea of trying to bring some of the neighborhood into the build for the cohesion. So I put that all over Willow Creek on all of the community lots pretty much, with the exception of one that is coming later. I think it was the cemetery that ultimately didn't end up getting any of it. And what that does at the end, I'll show the world map, and I think I am going to do a tour video as well, so if you guys want to see like everything in more detail, I should be putting out some kind of a Willow Creek tour video once I playtest everything and I'm like ready to launch this version of Willow Creek. I will be doing that, but I'm going to show at the end of this the overhead map view of Willow Creek, the new version, and you'll see on it that you can see like all the pathing matches the world and matches each other. And so now the overhead map just looks so clean and very nice. With redoing Tiana's mansion, the LaBeouf mansion, and then I had the Bayou neighborhood where most of the lots over there, if not all actually off the top of my head, are brand new. Then we have this neighborhood that I'm currently in, and I would say 2 of them are brand new here. No, yes, 2 of them are brand new here. The rest of them were renovations, but they were major renovations. And then the neighborhood that we're going to be moving into after this is the Dumbo neighborhood. The Dumbo neighborhood did not get touched nearly as much, but it definitely got updated. And then the last neighborhood is the commercial district down by the water in the bottom left-hand corner of the Willow Creek map. That one didn't get touched nearly as much either, but it did get a brand new lot. All that to say, I did so much work on this world that at this point, I'm going to have to replay test everything. So that is a little bit annoying, because what I don't have to do is like put in new clubs, do all the characters. All of the characters are done, except for at this point, I added some characters to the Rescuers household. I added Penny, and I added in Madame Medusa's henchmen, and they are going to need like some updating, some club stuff, some outfits, some perks, like all those things that I normally do with my brand new Sims. And no one else I don't think is brand new. So as far as characters go, I'm not really going to have to touch very much at all, but basically every one of my builds is going to have to be replay tested, which does take me a little bit of time. And after I do that, I'll be ready to launch Willow Creek version 2. And it'll probably be the next video that you guys see before I start the renovations on Forgotten Hollow, because that just sequentially makes the most sense. But I am ready right now to jump into Forgotten Hollow, so I am going to be starting that very, very soon. If you're a patron, you already know the plan, and that's something that I do offer to patrons. They get to see that stuff a little bit early. They get to see like the planned map that's labeled, that shows what I'm going to be doing to the world before I even start. They also get to do planning with me. So for renovations, there hasn't been a lot of planning to do, because it's really just like stuff that I want to tick off in my head as like a mental list of to-do things. But when you do a new world, I do planning sessions where I tell people to just tell me all the movies that you want to see in this world. What are your ideas, your thoughts, what fits here aesthetically? And then I take everybody's ideas and I make a master list of everything, and then I pick my favorites and I put them onto a map, and I let everyone look at it and make sure that they like it. And it's not really like I don't normally do like a do we all agree type situation, because it can be tough. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of ideas. There's sometimes I have to like explicitly be like, yeah, I cannot fit that in this world, and I know that when I do that I disappoint people, but I really, really try to include as many people as possible, as many ideas as possible. And that is sometimes why replacement lots exist, because sometimes somebody gives me a lot that is so perfect that I can't ignore it, but I have no room for it. And that's usually why a replacement lot comes to be. If you are my highest tier patron, I do offer something called fan requests, which comes up whenever I am doing, or right at the beginning planning stages of a brand new world. You can put in like a specific fan request, which is like, I would like to see this in this world. And then I will do it, and I kind of like work with that person privately to make sure all the details are fleshed out and they get everything that they want out of that experience. But I do have some rules and some caveats to that. Like, it has to be from a movie that's already going into the world. You can't request that something goes into Ravenwood if I was never going to cover it to begin with. So it has to be like from a movie that was already going to be there, or is already kind of planning to be there, and you want to see like a specific thing. And people usually use this to do builds, although I haven't had one in a really long time. But you can also use it for characters. Like, there's sometimes characters that I'm really going to kind of skip or are going to get cut, or they're not going to make the townie list or the bonus list. And I have had people use it for that, which I totally encourage because characters are much, much easier for me to agree to than like a whole build. But I had one, for example, one time in Sulani. I had a fan request for the Catfish Club, I think it's called, from The Little Mermaid 3, which is kind of like, I think it's called Little Mermaid's Beginning, and it's a prequel movie, but it is technically the third one. It is a mermaid nightclub that the characters kind of like go to hide because I think music is outlawed in the kingdom. So they go there to like play music and sing, and it's an underwater mermaid nightclub. The challenge with that is that it didn't have like an outside, so I had to come up with something on my own, but they really wanted that idea in Sulani, and because it comes from a like the extended Disney media library, which is anything other than the main storylines like the sequel movies, I usually would not pursue something like that, but they had put in a fan request for it, and Sulani's not a huge world, so originally it was really tough, but I made it work. I ended up doing it as a replacement lot, and it became one of my favorite builds in that world. It's this beautiful castle-y nightclub, mermaid, water vibes. It is so beautiful, and it became one of my favorite builds for the world, so it's always like really fun to work with people and try to figure out how I can make something that they really particularly like want to see in the save file come to life. I will say though, I don't accept these for all worlds. If a world is really small, I turn them off and I tell people, sorry, I can't take anything for this world, because imagine if I took a fan request for Forgotten Hollow and there's 5 lots and 2 of them are people's fan requests, like it doesn't really work out that way. And sometimes I turn them off because there's too much going on. Like I already have 4 or 5 movies in a world and it's tough. Like I can't always make it work, but I really do try. And I always announce when a world is picked whether fan requests are going to be available or not. For Ravenwood, they are technically available, although it's getting to be like late stage at this point right now that if someone wanted to submit one, it would be really tough for me to put it in because I kind of already have the map planned out, and we are tight for Ravenwood. Let me tell you, there were so many really great ideas. There were so many good movies that were great picks, and there was something that I really wanted to do, which I knew that basically I wanted to pull one of my movies out of Hemford on Bagley and put it into Ravenwood. Some of you can probably guess what that movie is going to be, and because I was moving that movie, it created like a huge conflict immediately because I sucked up one neighborhood that was going to go towards that movie. So I think my patrons probably felt like there was more room than there was, and there is so many movies that could have gone there, but I ultimately, as per usual with like those medium-sized 12-lot worlds, had to cut one movie that was very popularly requested for the world. And I'll talk about this way more when we get to Ravenwood because I'm going to be able to like show you guys everything that was decided. But at this point in Ravenwood's design process, if you tried to get me to like change a lot, it would be really tough because they're like kind of all decided at this point. But for the next world, who knows? Depends on how big the fairies world is. Depends on if we do the fairies world, if we do the city worlds, especially San Myshuno, which is on my very, very near radar. There is so much room in San Myshuno. I will definitely take fan requests for San Myshuno. Little bit of a side note and something important to point out if you did not know this. Businesses and Hobbies adds candy, and you do get them on the restaurant menus. So when I was double checking the menu for the Crown Jewel, you'll see that there are cotton candy options on there. There is candy, like lollipop options, and to me it looked like maybe some of the desserts were a little bit new as well, like some new options with brownies and things. Obviously didn't include any of that in the Crown Jewel, but you could make like a little restaurant that is an actual candy store now. You could also just have a candy store. There's the candy making like item that comes with that pack anyway, so I'm sure there's a way to set up a small business that sells candy and you could have your Sims like create it live, and that's like one way to do it. But if you wanted to have a restaurant where the menu was only candy, you could do that now. Kind of how I mentioned earlier, I really wanted the Crown Jewels menu to be a little bit uninspired. It's definitely lightly inspired by Tiana's Palace, but when it comes to actually picking the items, I did put a flair of the southern cuisine and a flair of some of like the French inspiration that those southern states, and particularly like the Louisiana area, tends to have. So like maybe some macarons, maybe some particular ice creams and things. I don't know. I definitely went for almost like a 1-for-1 compared to Tiana's, but then the the less inspired version of each thing. And I've talked about this before, but something that I do like to do when I'm trying to do these restaurants that are clearly supposed to be maybe not the best in town, I tend to put things on the menu that when you go there, you're like, why is this even on the menu? And the classic example I use is chicken nuggets, because chicken nuggets are going to be available most of the time no matter where you go. But if you go to like a really, really fine dining experience, maybe such as Tiana's, you're not going to see chicken nuggets on the menu. But if you're going to a place like the Crown Jewel that's almost pretending to be what Tiana's is, you might see chicken nuggets. Between the 3 restaurants that you guys just saw in the last neighborhood, I do think that I actually touched the staff uniforms for all of them. Clearly, they're not all included today. I think I only did Tiana's Palace, but I believe all of them got at least minorly updated. And I do remember off the top of my head that Duke's Cafe, Tiana wears that yellow dress when she's serving in the movie, and I did have something kind of similar to it in the Disney save, but I ended up going back in and finding something a lot closer, something that fits the diner vibes a lot better. So those types of things did get updated as well. For the rest of today's video, the renovations are going to go a lot quicker because a lot of what is to come is just more simple and a lot of just adding packs in and maybe changing some plants out, and very much less actual reconstruction of the building or any major changes to anything like that, starting in the Dumbo neighborhood. So this neighborhood now, as we are ending, is going to be the Dumbo Circus, the Pink Elephant, which is my new bar if you didn't see the speed build. Across the street is the Casey Jr. train, which did receive a couple of minor alterations and will be up next. And then the new Disney Archives building. It is a library in this neighborhood. And at the end of the cul-de-sac is 21 Royal, which is a vacation rental. And that I think is also included for a very short clip in today's video. Got some updates from the Secret Sanctuary pack. So this is what I call my Dumbo neighborhood, starting with the Dumbo Circus lot. This is going to be repurposed into a small business, and I'm going to try to obviously coordinate the tents correctly. I had previously, like a few updates to the Disney Save a Go, gone into the Dumbo, and I think his mother's name is Jumbo, circus tent that is basically like their little house slash room, and updated it with the circus toddler kit so that there were a couple of pieces at least from that in here, considering that the theming is pretty much spot on, but it doesn't really call for it because I think the point of Dumbo in a sense is that maybe he doesn't have everything he needs, if you will. Like, I don't think he would have tons of toys and tons of books and things. He might have a couple of things, and I think Jumbo probably does the best that she can. But I think the way that I would like play her, and in my head how I picture her, is that she's very busy. She works for the circus. She, maybe even like unwillingly so, is overly working for the circus, and she doesn't get a ton of time with her baby. And that's kind of why I aged down Timothy, so that he could be a babysitter slash companion that was a little bit closer in age to Dumbo. But I'm going to be aging him up so that he can actually work at the circus. However, that was kind of just my original thinking here. And if you could make toddlers work, I suppose in some regard, he works at the circus too. Obviously, we're not going to be implementing anything like that, but headcanon, he also works and lives here and performs in some regard. Most of the renovation is just going around and neighborhood matching, updating the plants. Really fixing the trees was one of my big things because, like I mentioned earlier, this neighborhood has a different tree in particular that like really embodies the neighborhood, and I wanted to make sure all of the lots in the Dumbo neighborhood had these trees around so it fits really well when you're panning around and you can see the entire neighborhood. And before, I had used some other ones, and I think they were all base game, like they all kind of fit in the area, but it wasn't the correct ones for this neighborhood of the map. I also went in and updated just a little bit with the party kit, but I think I had done that previously as well. I didn't want to go crazy with it. I wanted to just like clean everything up a little bit. I already have a lot of balloons and streamers and things here. I didn't need to do necessarily like any more, but if there were better objects in that party kit, then I definitely wanted to change it up a little bit. And basically how this is going to work is the big tent in the middle is going to be the actual like location. I could do almost like a cover charge when you come in and have the kiosk charge people for entry, and then try to find some things in the small business catalog of like activities that matches up well with a circus without actually being able to like fully do performances or whatever. I actually have not created any small businesses as of doing this voiceover, so I don't know what's like in the system and what's available. Maybe some of you can make some recommendations about what the actual like tasks that I can assign to the employees employees and what the things are that might line up really well with the circus. I can think of like probably candy making might be in there. I wonder if there's anything to do with performances, entertaining, balloons, gymnastics of some kind possibly. Also important to mention, I do have multiple zoo animals on this lot, and there is a little bit of a zoo area to the back. I have a zebra, an otter, I think a lion, and a tiger possibly, and they are a part of like the household. Their area didn't really get touched, but I think I changed maybe some like the way that it's laid out in the back there, and it's not huge for them. I would love to be able to come back to the idea of doing more of like a dedicated zoo area if it comes up for a particular Disney movie, but I felt like it really helped add something to this household, whereas before it was only just the 4 characters and it felt kind of small considering that it was a full circus. So I felt like actually adding in the animals and giving the aspect of like the household having to care for those animals. Like the zebra is obviously a horse, so the horse has to be taken care of. And I believe the lion and the tiger are both large dogs, and then the otter is either a small dog or a cat, but I think a small dog probably. They each have little caged in areas and their own food and water and toys and things, but if you think about it, you have to take care of all of those animals. So if you're just playing this household besides the small business, there's a toddler on the lot that needs to be taken care of, there's 4 animals, one of them is a horse, there's a lot to do already, so adding in the small business is almost going to kind of help in the sense of making it a lot more busy and lively. And then something I like to do, and I always mention, is that obviously I've made a strip down the middle outside of the main circus tent where you're meant to be eating, and I call this the midway. That's how I would know it to be. But it is going to require you to hire workers and vendors to tend to those different stalls. As far as I'm aware, in pretty much any type of lot, whether it's a community or a residential, if you have something like that on the lot, you can usually hire a vendor, a performer, and you can do multiple at that as well. So when you're running the small business, if the small business does not spawn vendors for the outside eating area, you can still have it work correctly by doing that. And then you would be doing that out of the business owner's money, so it all kind of works out anyway. Although I am hoping when I get into the system of the businesses, I might be able to work something out. I really don't know. I haven't played with them at all, and I also haven't watched anybody play with them. And I really do want to sit down and like watch a Let's Play so that I can become familiar with the system, but sometimes one of the best ways to do that is just to play with it yourself. And I know I'm going to have questions, but right now I'm just kind of spitballing ideas at you guys as somebody who has not currently used the system yet. It does open up the possibility and the idea of having lots more small businesses in the save, and if you can think of any where it already exists in the save and maybe I should go back and change it to be a small business, definitely let me know your thoughts on that. I have been thinking that possibly, and what came up in my Patreon community quite a bit, is doing my cat cafe back in Oasis Springs as a small business so that I can like properly set everything up for it to be a cat cafe. And I might do that. The only, I guess, reason not to do it is because I don't know if I want Jasmine owning the business, and that pairs over with the idea that I was talking about earlier where I don't know if I want characters in the Disney save owning things that they don't actually really own in their movies. And obviously I implement these ideas that are like technically not canon to the movies, like there is no cat cafe in Agrabah that is ever mentioned or shown, and that thematically is kind of like my own creation. But I almost don't mean to have like all the characters owning those types of businesses either. Those are just like little filler ideas that I create to add more magic, more diversity, more types of lots, more anything to the save file. And I do think that that's really important, but I don't know if I want like my princess characters owning tons of small businesses in regards to their hobbies, if that makes sense. But let me know your thoughts, definitely. I might go back and take a look at the Bugs Life households, or I guess specifically the Bugs Circus household, and see if I can work something out there with the small business. And I think that that does make sense, but it's not set up like this where there is a dedicated tent for random Sims or whoever to come over. So that one might be a little bit more complicated because there's not really like a lot to necessarily have the small business on, and the area that I created for them is more residential and doesn't really fit over as like the circus. Moving on to the Casey Jr. train, just some very light renovations here, although I do think I went in and updated some of the carts. They are each themed after various animals that would have been visible throughout Dumbo. One's like a tiger, elephant, cheetah, and I think it was the Love Struck pack that we received some more wallpapers and items that have animal print on them. So I probably went through and just updated that a little bit, and I also think we have some new objects. Like previously we did not have the little tiger stuffy that comes with for rent, and I probably probably stuck one of those in the tiger themed cart. The main house at the back is a giraffe house, and it's a little bit like barren when you go in there, but the point is the entire place is a lounge. So each of the train carts are musically based. They each have a different instrument inside for music. So one of them is like the tiger lounge that also has a guitar, and the other one is a bathroom, and one of them is a cheetah print train car with a piano. So each of them has like musical space and a place to come and play music, listen to music. And then the big long house at the back is a giraffe house, which in live mode would be so cool if it actually had like animated little giraffes running around. But I just ultimately used statues as decoration, and then there is a bar in there so you can go in and get a drink, enjoy the giraffes. It's a very, very unique lot considering not just the giraffe house, but also the train. I haven't done a train anywhere else in the Disney save, so this marks off like two cool kind of things here. Something kind of funny, but I guess also not, in my head when I kept thinking about the Casey Jr. train, I thought to myself that it was going to be a very big renovation on this lot, because in my head I had kind of remembered that I didn't like this lot for some reason and that it needed a ton of work in order for me to be happy with it. And that was the ultimate goal at the end of Willow Creek. I wanted to be happy with everything that I made. So in my head, this one was going to be one that took a really long time. And when I loaded up the lot, and I haven't looked at it in probably a few months now, I kind of wonder what my issue was. And I do this quite a bit, like quite a bit more than you would think. I will say in my head and to myself, that build that you made is no good. And when you see it, you're going to remember why it wasn't good to begin with. You're going to hate it. There's so many things you could have done better. And I don't know why I do this. I guess it is a matter of like an artist being their own worst critic in a sense. Like I just remember me disliking what I do and like thinking to myself, it's terrible, basically. At the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, that thing you made, bad. And so I was expecting to come into this with the mindset of really having to renovate this, downsize it, change it. I don't know what I was going to do. But then I loaded it up and I don't dislike it. I don't know what I was thinking. It is a little crammed here. It needed the plant changes most definitely, but this is a really unique build, and it's actually one of like my more popular videos on YouTube. I don't know if it is because it's so unique that it's so popular. I guess my only issue with it ultimately is that it is the one that is the toughest to fit into this residential neighborhood that I'm putting it into, but I always thought of it as a train that is abandoned or permanently stationed. And then the circus is here like kind of permanently. It used to be a traveling circus, so they had the train that carried the animals, and now it is no longer a traveling circus. And so they kind of have the train up even maybe as like a spectacle of the parade or a monument that you can go and visit, or it's a part of the permanent, now permanent circus town area. And the circus doesn't move. You have the pink elephant now, and you have this giraffe house where you can come and have like a very unique experience and also see the original Casey Jr. train that used to carry the animals around. And so it might be one of those cases where in my head, if we could have the ability to make your own worlds in The Sims 4, this is one that I would do a lot differently, because I don't want it anywhere near the streets or the roads. And I might have even made it longer and the train carts a bit longer, put some pools in them, like really, really go for it. But I'm not obviously given the space to do that here. And I think that is at the end of the day, my only real issue with it. Everything else just needed some touching up. It is a very nice build. I found that to be the case a lot, if I'm not gonna lie, when it comes to Willow Creek, just because so many of the builds here are a bit older in my roster now. I really thought I needed to basically redo the world. In a sense, I knew that some of the newer renovations that came out when I did the second version of Willow Creek were for the most part going to be fine, but even when I did that version included things such as New Orleans Square, so it is a somewhat newer build, and I even thought New Orleans Square was also going to receive a very heavy renovation, and then I got there and realized I don't know what I'm talking about. It looks fine. It's actually better than fine. Sometimes I even look at my builds and think I am a good builder. That looks good even. I guess you're your own worst critic at the end of the day. Something that you'll notice me putting down repeatedly, I believe especially in this neighborhood, I really wanted to use those street lights from the romantic garden stuff, and that actually, what's weird about those light posts is that if you search in the lights it doesn't come up for some reason. You need to actually like search the whole pack. And I'm placing those all over the builds in this neighborhood, but I believe I also used it in the previous neighborhood, the commercial district. They are very bright white, and I will be changing those in the final version of the save so that they glow a little bit more of like a rusticy yellow or warm orangey yellow color. And I did that in certain builds like as I was building, and then I realized it's ultimately not going to matter because I think you actually have to do it in the actual save for it to stick over. I don't believe those kinds of things carry over the gallery, because fun fact, if you didn't know, what I'm actually building in currently for most of the video is called my building save. It's an old broken version of the Disney save that I now just exclusively use for building, and I don't like to actually use my save file for anything other than putting the finalized versions of builds in and then quickly adding in all the character stats without running as much time as possible. The goal is to play the save file as little as possible and like play test everything that I can or implement everything that I can elsewhere and then just copy and paste it over, because I don't want a ton of time to accumulate in the save. It causes issues long term. So I have a building save file, I have a testing save file, and then I also have the Disney save, and then I have old versions of all of those that I do like various things with. But most of the time when you see videos, it is not the Disney save itself, which might be why backgrounds are different, like builds in the surrounding area are not exactly correct. And if I'm referencing something, it's probably right, but if I'm not, then you're not going to, you're going to want to ignore it, if you will. Moving on to 21 Royal, this is the vacation rental, and this is a different lot type than like a regular rental, like a residential rental. So when you hear me say things such as I am not putting rentals in the save right now, I do mean I am not putting residential rentals in the save right now. I do put in vacation rentals. They were put in like years ago now, and I have been putting them in since they became an idea. It's just like a lot that you can basically rent for a various amount of time, however you would like, and go and stay in, kind of a little bit more like Airbnb style. 21 Royal was Walt Disney's apartment house in Disneyland, and now it is rented out as an exclusive dining experience that is very expensive, as I've read. So including this was my way of putting Disneyland specifically into this neighborhood, and it made sense because I was going to pair it over with New Orleans Square. New Orleans Square was also Disneyland based, but also Louisiana and New Orleans based specifically. So it was my way of like putting in the splash of Disneyland into this world, but also specifically this building is near or above the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland, which is in New Orleans Square. So I have read. I haven't been there, but I am going in less than 6 months now, I think. It'll be cool to kind of see it in real life, because to be honest with you, I had a terrible time finding reference for the outside of this building. I had to make some of it up on my own, but I think because the shell of the building also shares a little bit with Pirates of the Caribbean, there isn't a perfect way to replicate it anyway, so instead I just made it into like a true house and used a lot of the same color references and the exterior references that I could find, and then just made it like a more functional space. So it's a vacation rental. You can come and stay here. I believe there is ultimately 2 bedrooms. It's very Walt Disney style. I don't know how else to say that. The way I always describe this style is like Titanic-esque. I do not know what the proper terminology is for it, but I pair it over with the Titanic because I think of like bright red drapery, deep saturated wood colors. There is a sense of elegance. There is a sense of class. There is candles and chandeliers and finer sculpture pieces, maybe even like golden-y sort of ones. The entire place feels like kind of luxury, but leaning more like very old luxury, like Victorian luxury. And I call this Walt Disney style because he had a second apartment in Disneyland that was above the firehouse in Disneyland, and I have also made that in the Disney save. It's over in Evergreen Harbor, and it has a very similar style to the interior. And if I remember correctly, and somebody can correct me down below if this isn't true, but I think that this one was actually under construction or being created when Walt Disney died, so I don't think he ever officially got to stay and live here. And I think after he passed, that his wife or his family members might have privately used it for a few years, and then it was repurposed into other things, and then eventually this dining experience that I keep mentioning. So it is done in his style and kind of in his honor, but I think the reason that it is like more publicly available and used as something that you can almost like book inside of Disney versus his other one above the firehouse, which I believe you also, I think you also can book that one, but I think it's more of like an exclusive VIP tour. You might even have to be invited. I don't remember all the information at this point. This one is more attainable, is what I remember, and I think it might even even be because he never actually got to use it, but don't quote me on that. The only things I really wanted to do here was just fix the plants, match everything to the neighborhood, and then I wanted to add in the secret sanctuary kit. There are a lot of pieces in that. It gives me Clue vibes. That's like the Clue pack for me, but there are a lot of things that come with that. The fireplace is so like beautifully carved, and there is a single tile record player. There are bookcases that have hidden doors. It's a really cool kit. I wanted to add it to this build. It felt like it fit the vibes exactly for what I was looking for. And then I just really changed over some of the lighting, added some additional candles and things, maybe some color stuff here and there, although I was pretty happy with how it turned out the first time. I think since this building has that New Orleans look to it because it's in New Orleans Square in Disneyland, this is one of the first buildings that I built of this like New Orleans style that really I feel like I found my footing. And the reason I know that is because when I went to go build Tiana's mansion and the LaBeouf mansion, and I was picking out the new stuff that I was going to use, and I knew that I wanted to like really get aesthetically correct this time around, I ended up using a lot of the same items from packs that I had used on this build, which was built much later than my original versions of Tiana's palace and the LaBeouf mansion, if that makes sense. So I built the original two versions of those mansions, and they didn't perfectly fit the aesthetics of like a New Orleans style build. And then 21 Royal was created much later, and I picked out a set of stuff for this, including the Strangerville windows, columns. Those really work for this style of building. And then when I redid the mansions, I ended up gravitating towards those similar sort of items. So they all look very similar. If you could line them all up on a big lot, they would all have the same groups of items used over and over again, but in different ways, obviously. And that's how I know I ultimately did it right, because this is all one region of the world and everything looks like it's being built in a similar sort of way, and that makes sense regionally. This is the last build in this neighborhood to clean it out, but if you missed, the brand new 2 new lots went into this area of the map. The Pink Elephant, which was the circus themed bar, and then the Disneyland Archives. That was a really big, kind of important build, and it's gonna fly a little bit under the radar according to YouTube, just in terms of views and things like that, but I promise you it's one of my like more inspired builds. I did a ton of research for it. I really recommend it, and it also features custom Disney original artwork on the walls that I handmade that took me a week to do. And by handmade, obviously I don't mean me, I mean the sim that painted it, but I had to go into Photoshop and do all of the custom content files for the paintings, and then I had to have my sim paint from reference off of those custom content paintings so that I was making new paintings that were not custom content. Hopefully that makes sense. It took about a week to put everything together and research all the artists and figure out the exterior of the building, and the layout was definitely very complicated with the stairs. Stairs are the bane of my existence as a builder. If I could put one thing as my #1 list of what I would like to see for The Sims in 2026, I'm not even banking on this year. I don't think it's coming, and I don't expect it to, but just one thing I could please beg for is spiral staircases that fit on 4 tiles, and that's my specific ask. Not a spiral staircase on 6 or 8 tiles, 4 tiles. I want tightly wound little spiral staircases that I can go and put into my castles and in my small builds and all over the place. That's the only thing I want, other than a game that is like perfectly fixed and fully functioning in every single capacity. Those are my 2 wishes. But it's one of my more favorite builds that I have done in the recent couple in this world. I would say it's probably my new favorite addition to this world, and the outside of it looks kind of like a vintage movie theater, and I personally really love that look, so highly recommend. Moving on, this is actually New Orleans Square, and you're probably not going to immediately recognize it because this is a candy shop that's tucked inside of New Orleans Square. This lot is very unique in the Disney Save because you can change the lot type and it will function depending on what you personally want it to be, and I think you can run it as it's set by default as a bar, and the bar is called Club 33. I did a replica of that if you're familiar with it from Disneyland. It's in this area in Disneyland specifically, so taking some photos and things that I could find from Disneyland, that is the bar as it like functions, and as you download the save, how it will be available. You can also change it to a restaurant, and you would have to change the menu and like doctor that yourself because those kinds of things don't stick once you change the lot type, but you can also run it as a restaurant. The building at the front right is called the Blue Bayou. That is a restaurant in Disneyland as well. I think I'm going to be eating there this year. That's one of the only ones that I'm kind of interested in possibly booking, and purely for the fact that it is inside the Pirates of the Caribbean ride and I want to watch the little boats go by. Not really because of the menu, if I'm so honest. I looked at it and it's not like inspiring, but I kind of want to go. And they're actually changing the menu a little bit for the 70th, so the 70th looks like we're gonna get some new options that I might be a little bit more excited about. I don't know if I'm eating there yet, so asterisk on that. But you can do that. There's also a little bit of a museum here. The museum can be run, I don't know why you would pick a museum if I'm honest, but it's there. And then if you wanted to run a retail, there's two retail options here. There is Madame Leota's Spellcaster shop at the front left part of the lot, and that might be in the build a little bit today as well. Or Disney, classically known for a candy store. And I'm not calling this like a Main Street confectionery or anything like that, specifically because I probably want to build that like a different location in the save file. I can see that like fully coming to fruition. So this is just supposed to be your dedicated New Orleans Square Disney candy shop, and I think I probably gave it a name paired off with Disneyland at the time, but it's not coming to mind what that actually was. And then with businesses and hobbies, you got the candy maker machine, and that added in cotton candy, lollipops, and so I wanted to come in and update this with the candy display case, the actual candy maker, and then some candy on display in the various stands and stuff. And I added in a little stand as well and like put a couple more things. The lollipops I didn't originally find. I knew I saw them in the catalog, but then I had to go and reinstall. I think it was Better Build and Buy was like installed incorrectly, so I couldn't find them. But for some reason the cotton candy was coming up, so I added that in. Thought to myself, I thought there was lollipops, and then went and did something else and came back and added the lollipops later. Speaking of the lollipops, those are going to come in handy later. I can visualize those being particularly useful for a certain girl from Wreck-It Ralph and any potential builds that I do regarding her. I have so many ideas for Wreck-It Ralph, which is one of the reasons why I want to do San Myshuno. San Myshuno is probably 99.99% sure going to be the Wreck-It Ralph world, and there is tons of characters in that movie. There are tons of video game references. There are apartments. There is like the little apartment that the Fix-It Felix game is based on, and all of the townsfolk characters from that. And then we obviously have Penelope and Ralph, and there's a lot to do there, a lot to cover. And then I have like all those extra little ideas that I come up with that you might want to have that kind of is like themed after Wreck-It Ralph but isn't necessarily shown in the movie. That's gonna fill, hopefully, a good chunk of San Myshuno, considering how absolutely large San Myshuno is. It's one world that I'm a little bit stressed about how much work, how many things there are to do there, but I know I'm gonna be like so having a blast with it because it'll be my first world where I get to renovate apartments. And I guess, well, I have done that in Evergreen Harbor, but this is really on like a different scale, and I love renovating apartments, and you guys love the apartments, like the Toy Story apartments, and I think it's just so much fun to like try to make a space work that's already sort of dedicated in a way that I would have maybe shaped it differently if I was going to design it myself, but I have to work within the parameters of that particular thing. I think I did add some werewolves and some crystal creation stuff to Madame Leota's shop. I believe that the shop was made before both of those existed, or probably sometime around the time that werewolves came out. And like I was saying earlier, you could turn this lot into a retail and run either Madame Leota's shop or the candy store if you wanted, but the candy store would take a little bit of adjusting because you currently can't get behind the counter. And I just did that so that your Sims aren't going back there and like messing with everything personally, because this is a huge lot. And even though you're only supposed to use like certain chunks of the buildings for the bar, because that's how it's set when you download it, because there is so much here and all the doors are open, you could really like do all sorts of stuff here, and that's great for playability, but it's also kind of to a fault because Sims can sometimes like go outside of where you want them to be and they'll go over to the restaurant and whatever it is. So kind of cool, but also you don't really want them going in the candy store and like stealing lollipops off the counter, or going in Madame Leota's shop and messing with all of the things that I've placed on the wall necessarily. Maybe you do, I don't know. Club 33 is actually quite big itself. It doesn't look like it because of like the main ground floor building that I put it into, but it has a bar when you first walk in on the ground floor. It's not like featured too much in today's video, to be honest with you, so I am just describing it to you. And then there is a floor above it that has more loungy, more places to sit, but you can go around on the front balcony and there is an additional door that's attached to the upstairs balcony, and that leads you through to more lounges, more like back rooms, rooms for gambling, rooms for playing games, and it leads to a lot of the upstairs buildings that are on this lot that are all a part of Club 33. So it does take up the majority of the build, to be fair. Everything else is a little bit more just for decoration, but I just wanted to do that. I felt like doing these builds that are a little bit larger and are more city or town based, almost like a village. Like it's the same concept as Belle's Village, where you have a lot of buildings that serve different functions. There's so many playability options for something like that, and I feel like it's so true to what we actually see in real life versus just every lot is its own building, and how that can be kind of like a city block or kind of like a little village walking town area, whatever you need it to be. But also you would have these offshoots where you tuck it into little corners that have even more stores and more places to go. So it's important to include some of them occasionally, although they are very big builds. They are builds that are difficult to maintain, difficult to update, and a little bit difficult for people to download. If I'm so honest, I get sometimes worried that I'm like overdoing it, because I know that if you play on a computer that is not the most new, you're probably gonna struggle with some of the things that I make, and those are the types of builds that definitely come to mind immediately. But at the same time, my computer is creeping towards 10 years old and my computer is running it, so I don't know. Moving on to Southern Dreams. This is a lot that a lot of you probably have not seen in a very long time. It probably is not remembered by most of you because it is not my most inspired idea, but I think what I really wanted, I really feel like there's so much culture and history in the section of the world that Willow Creek is based out of. Like there is so much you could cover and so many things that are so important to Louisiana specifically, the people that live there, the cultures that were cultivated, jazz music, the cuisine. There is so much history, and to do Willow Creek without a proper museum would never feel right. But it's not my favorite lot type to make, and I say this every single time I do one because it's never gonna like be the most exciting experience, and they are all laid out very similarly. With the exception of a few here and there, I did a museum in Sulani that is Ariel's museum, and it's called Thingamabob Grotto, and it has all of her collections and treasures from under the sea, and it actually looks like her grotto. So something like that, very cool and unique. But this is your standard museum, and it's in a classic, old school, traditional Louisiana style building, one that I probably found off of Google. I definitely wanted it to remain in this neighborhood. It would have been really easy to remove it, less easy to come up with another idea to replace it. But the other thing that you have to think about is, like I mentioned earlier, if you lived in New Orleans and you were there at the time that Princess Tiana became a princess, like she was this girl that grew up with her two working class parents that married a prince, and they now live in Louisiana and they own this restaurant, and it would be like it's such an important thing to the history. So I felt like carrying in some of the fantasy elements of Disney and bringing in the storyline of Disney and the history that would even like add to the area, it would be so important to historically like document all of that. And so they're featured as well in the museum as like important figures and important people to pay attention to. Big Daddy LaBeouf, also a very revered important figure according to the movie, so he is also featured, even more predominantly so, in the museum. But this was my way of maybe tying some of the movies in here together. There are some references to Disneyland in here. There is a little Maldonia section with a castle replica and some castle photos. There is a section that's dedicated to the rescuers and Penny's discovery of, I think it's called the Blue Diamond, the Devil's Diamond, something like that. Don't quote me. Madame Medusa is having her fish it out of like a mine, and when she finds it, she ends up making the news. Not Madame Medusa, Penny ends up making the news for finding it. So I could see them putting it in a museum and like kind of documenting the events of the whole thing, and it might be featured here. And that's my way of like tying the rescuers into this build, and then also having like frogs in here, also having the tributes to Tiana and Naveen, and then the Disneyland shout outs. So there is, from every movie in this world, there is something in here. However, when I went into the build, I realized it needed a little bit more help than I previously remembered. I just wanted to clean it up a little bit, and I know I keep saying that, but I just build a little bit differently now. I wanted to minimize some of the clutter. It's clear to me in certain sections of this build, I wasn't sure what to display, and that might have been from a lack of options at the time, or I don't know, but I went back into it and looked at it, and there were just certain pieces that I had put on display, and I could see kind of why I chose them, but I didn't like it anymore. So I wanted to tone tone down some of like the random clutter that was on display and really theme each section as it's gated around the same way that I did it in the original, where every piece is fenced off and themed, but tone it back and simplify what was there and really make it clear like why things are there, what they are. Everything in here makes sense. There is like stuff in here referencing jazz. There is frogs in here. There are sections that are dedicated to the animals and plant life that you might see from the area. There is a little movie section, some like royalty sort of section, and then there is instruments. Obviously that comes into play. Food references a little bit here as well. Some jewelry, that rescuers display, and I think toning it down in the way that I did, it now all makes a lot more sense, and it's going to be clear if you decide to go here why everything is here now. We also now have couches that you can piece together and ottoman pieces, and you can make kind of like round sitting ones. How do I say that? Sorry, we are deep in this video now, and if you're still here, thank you so much for being here this long. This was a very long video and probably the longest voiceover I've ever done, so I am trying to truck through it, but if I start calling things weird stuff this late in the video, I think we can all agree that you understand why. I've actually done this voiceover over multiple days as well, so I'm not sitting down for almost 3 hours straight and doing this. This is a multiple month project at this point. But you know when you go to a museum and sometimes they'll have seating, sometimes they won't because they really don't want you to like sit and linger, but typically you will see some kind of centralized seating, and it might be even the round sort of ones that spin around and you can like sit from all angles and view the art pieces. But also, yeah, you sometimes go to museums and there is no seating, and I find that to be really annoying. I went to, it was called the Wallace Collection, and you can go see the Wallace Collection in London if you're ever here, but at the time it had a particular display and it was Disney themed. So they had pieces from Mary Blair and they had original concept art from Disney, and that obviously intrigued me to want to go see it, and it was one of the best experiences I have ever had in my life as far as like seeing true real Disney art that they were not copies. Like a lot of them were the original pieces on display, and there's something so incredibly special about being able to view something like that. One thing in particular that was amazing, when you walked in, there was a display and it was the Cinderella dress transformation scene. So when she's wearing the tattered pink dress that the stepsisters destroy, and then she transforms with magic into her silver gown. They had frame by frame, I think it was anywhere between like 50 and 100 individual drawings that led from the beginning of where that scene takes place to the last one, and it was, if you had like played them in order, the transition, and they had them all lined up in this huge display on the wall, and then on the side they showed you how if you lined them all up and you flipped through them really quickly, it would turn into the Cinderella transformation scene. And if I remember correctly, there was something there talking about how it was one of Walt Disney's personal favorite pieces of animation that he had ever seen. Like it was incredible even to him, and to see it in person and like then watch them play what it looked like to transition through all of those art pieces was absolutely breathtaking. But the other thing that I remember about the Wallace Collection is that they had no seating anywhere in the entire museum, and there were people in every single room to guard the pieces and keep an eye on everybody and make sure that nobody was getting too close to anything or touching anything. And those people all had chairs, obviously, because they sit there all day and watch you, and I totally understood that. But I was so annoyed that there was nowhere to sit because we were in there for so long and I was really taking it in and really enjoying it, and I would have loved to have just like had a little seat and relaxed for a second and then continue walking around, but they like specifically do not put seats in there, I think because they don't want you to linger. Like honestly, they want you out. All that to say, my museum does have seating and you can sit and linger if you want to. And something else that I added to this new edition with the Secret Sanctuary pack, I believe it was, on the second floor, I added in a little place, a little bar to go get maybe a glass of wine and enjoy the artistry. And that would be, I don't know, maybe some museums do stuff like that. I imagine most of them don't want you having any liquids around anything that they have in here, but this is Fantasy The Sims world, so I can do whatever I want, and I felt like this place needed a nice drink as you're sort of walking around. This also has has like local museum vibes. This isn't anything big. This isn't the British Museum. This is local curation, local history, someone putting something together in a building that is like kind of owned by the public or owned by the city and showcasing in that sort of a way. Very touristy, very like destination. If you came into the area, it would be a quick few hour viewing, maybe even not that much. I could also see this as something that Naveen possibly got into or his family made and had dedicated and like fell in love with the area, although I've never really like talked about that or canonized that into their storylines in the Disney save, but it is something to think about. I think that when Naveen moved to New Orleans to be with Tiana, because that's kind of how it's portrayed in the movie, like they get married in New Orleans at the church, and then I think they end up like permanently living there because Tiana's palace is there and she runs her whole business and everything. So if Naveen lives there, the family, the royal family, probably comes in to visit, and I think that they would get more invested in the immediate area and they might have some additions, some donations, some new buildings created. I'm hoping to never have to come back and fix this build again. I don't normally come here and check it out too often. It's not like high on my immediate radar of maintaining, just because it's not really a movie recreation. It is just an accumulation of ideas and sort of like a bonus lot. So I don't do too much work here, but if we did get a bands pack, depending on what that comes with, I could see coming in here to add more music-based things or instruments or something like that, depending on, again, like what the pack actually comes with. A different Disney museum that I did actually have the luck of being able to visit, and I say luck because honestly, if I didn't live in London, I wouldn't get so many cool opportunities. Previously, I lived in the state of Maine in the United States, and then before that, I was from upstate New York. So both of those states don't really get a lot of like traveling things. Whenever you're doing like traveling concerts, traveling events, you're not going to typically get those. The best I ever got was living in upstate New York, but they typically are not going to come that far north. And now living in London, whenever something is touring, 9 times out of 10 it's going to come here, and that has become so cool because every time I just get so lucky. I feel very fortunate actually. And the Disney 100 museum was touring maybe 2 years ago. It was like actually during the Disney 100, but I think they ended up extending it beyond that as well. And they brought so many like original prop movie pieces. They had a Cinderella slipper from the live action movie. They had so many original artwork pieces, and they set it all up in the XL here in London, and I got to go, and it was beautiful. I think I took my sister. She might have even been in town when we went to that as a surprise. There were costumes from the Little Mermaid Broadway show. So cool. And when we were inside, I had something else that was booked immediately after, and I thought we were going to be in and out in an hour, but we ended up staying and loving it and sucking in every moment of it, and we stayed so long that I had to call the thing that we were going to next and see if they could push it out an hour or two, because we were not going to make it. Like, we were having such a good time at this museum, and it was brilliant, and there were so many really cool unique pieces in there. I definitely wanted to go see it again. I never got around to going back before it left town. Fortunately enough, some of these pieces usually end up on display in the Disney parks. You have to go inside the buildings and kind of look around though. If you're one of those people that just goes for rides and food and doesn't explore, you should pop in a building or two, especially those random ones that are theater ones or just have something randomly up on the wall. You might not know what you'll find inside. They have a lot of original pieces and things that you can go in there and view. And in Disney World, it's air conditioned, so it's a nice treat to be able to pop in somewhere and see some original artwork and then also cool off in the AC. I went into one and it had a lot of the live action Little Mermaid stuff on display from the recent like live action one, not the Broadway performance. And then I went into, this might have been a few years ago now, so I don't know if these are still available, but I want to say in the French Pavilion at Epcot, one of the buildings in there, and it might be a building that you go into before a show or a performance, I cannot remember off the top of my head, had at the time some of the Beauty and the Beast live action stuff on display in there as well. And I remember the dress, the beautiful yellow dress. And I know so many people hate that dress, and I totally get why, because it's the wrong shade of yellow. It's not gold. It's not like anything like Belle's dress from the movie, but there is something like 20,000 Swarovski crystals on that dress, and when you see it, it's stunning. I absolutely was like breath taken away by it. They also had little props of the different characters like Lumiere, Cogsworth, and like the clock and the things that they actually are. One of many replicas I'm sure that they made for use in the movie. And I believe they switch that kind of stuff out over time, and it ends up like traveling other places, so it's always cool when you get an opportunity to see some of that stuff. They had Descendants in there as well when I went, not in that same building, but I had gone once and they had a bunch of Descendants stuff from the most recent movie at the time. The only other thing of note about Southern Dreams the museum is just to note that I switched the lot placement between this and Other Side. So Other Side was originally located right next to New Orleans Square, and I flip-flopped Southern Dreams and Other Side Nightclub because Other Side Nightclub is also the home of Dr. Facilier. That is the new small business that I'm adding into this world, and pretty much like it for today's video, by the way. And the lot immediately next door is much larger and was Chapter 3 bookstore, which was the Beauty and the Beast bookshop, but is getting removed. I cannot remember if it's actually going to a new place in the save file. I think it's getting taken out, but we'll have to see later on, and is now being made into a New Orleans cemetery, which makes so much more sense to immediately pair to the lot next door this spooky, witchy nightclub that's based on tarot and voodoo and Dr. Facilier himself and his voodoo emporium specifically, but there was also like a Disney mobile game that gave him a full building for like his house and showed you what the outside of the voodoo emporium looks like a little bit better than even the movie does, and this is a replica of the building based on the game. So I wanted it closer to the cemetery and like right next door, and they just pair really well together. They look aesthetically a lot better together. Other Side Nightclub is becoming a small business. The little house on the left is Dr. Facilier's actual home. It's a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, tiny, cluttered, glowy little voodoo house, and it's attached to the nightclub itself because he's going to be in charge of and running the nightclub. I always felt like that made the most sense even before we had rentals or hobbies, businesses and hobbies or anything like that, because he would definitely have to be doing something that allowed him to be able to like do readings, do tarot, have an environment where people will organically come to him. And you could do some of that in like a tourist kind of way and go out on the streets and try to get people to sit down and like do cards for them. But if you have more of like a smoke and mirrors type of voodoo shop that people can come into, that also makes sense. But I didn't want it to be a retail. I wanted it to be a place that especially occult sims could come to and actually get like real gear and real stuff. So the way that Other Side works, it's a nightclub and it's glowy and dark and spooky, and it definitely has a particular vibe to it that I feel like a lot of sims may not like or wouldn't go towards, wouldn't gravitate towards. But for spellcasters specifically, this is kind of like the real deal. They know that if you go to the back rooms of this place, you can get proper fortune tellings, proper readings, like real true, not even smoke and mirrors, like actual real mediums work here. They just like, you kind of have to know somebody to get in or to go to the back rooms to be able to do stuff back there. And then one of the rooms in particular is based specifically on the room that you routinely see in Princess and the Frog that Dr. Facilier keeps going into to make deals with the shadow voodoo creatures from the other side. They are the ones that empower him, that are helping him try to take over New Orleans so that he can become the leader, and therefore they help him and so they can become the leader as well. And he shows that in the voodoo emporium. He like casts spells for them to be present. So one of the rooms back there is supposed to be that like dedicated specific room that is shown in the movie. Also around the back, like in the backyard, I put down one of the spellcaster stalls, and if you hire a vendor, they can actually buy stuff there. So again, if you were playing a spellcaster and you needed to come get something, this does double as a retail in that sense. You can come and visit the booth here. They would just have to hire the vendor, or the vendor would have to be on for that to fully work out. But nevertheless, it's there. And this lot got updated very heavily with Life and Death. Life and Death adds in so many new, really cool occult items that are going to be featured in this build, but also a little bit in the cemetery next door. I did the cemetery already as of me doing this audio, and it's already out and available as a speed build. So if you want to see like the final lot that goes in this world on the lot to the left of it, then you're going to have to check out that speed build separately. It was a brand new build, so it didn't end up making it into today's video for obvious reasons. But that pack comes with a lot of, in particular, like debug sort of things, but also the paintings, the decor. There are some wallpapers in Life and Death that feature skulls in the wallpaper, and because we are doing Dr. Facilier theming and he's supposed to be the owner, I wanted to have even more of that on the wallpaper. Like, it all kind of makes sense. It's definitely definitely needed additions to this place. But at the same time, as you can see, the interior at other side is very gaudy and cluttered and hectic and a little bit like, I guess, eclectic, if you will. There's already a lot going on here, a lot of detail, and I didn't really feel the need to add like too much more clutter to it. I just wanted to put in a couple of pieces from Life and Death so that they are definitely here, but it's not needed. There's already so much going on here, as you can see. I did also update his house a little bit. I added some of those tarot paintings from the debug onto the walls upstairs. I downsized some of his space and some of his clutter items to make them a little bit more curated towards like specifically like occult items. And again, with the small business aspect, I think I'm going to be charging, I think, a cover charge. That makes the most sense for a nightclub, definitely. And that's pretty much going to be it for today's Willow Creek changes video. If you liked this style of video, please let me know. I will put something like this together when I do Forgotten Hollow, possibly. It depends on how Forgotten Hollow goes, but then I have another world renovation, like I keep mentioning, after that, and I think that that will create a similar idea to this, where I'm gonna have a lot of little changes that don't go into their own video. It probably won't be as long as today's video, but if you like this idea, this concept, it's a little bit of a behind the scenes to some of the stuff that gets worked on in between videos. Let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know if you like all the changes that you saw today as well. Any questions, any concerns? Stay tuned for the tour video of New Willow Creek. You're gonna love to see everything in live mode, and we'll check out all of the characters, the rescuer stuff, the things that were in the speed builds that got skipped in today's video for obvious reasons. And then immediately after all of that, I'll be moving into Forgotten Hollow to start the renovations there. And there will be brand new lots. There's going to be like just some minor changes, and then I think 3 new lots because I have some stuff that's moving. I'm very excited to share the plans for all of that very soon with you guys. If you'd like to check out those plans early, become a patron, support the Disney